the stream on now? Okay, so.
Yeah, that too. Is everyone good to begin? Fantastic. Advantage one is finance. Chevron deference to federal financial agencies ensures massive overreach. Establishing that lenity Trump Chevron is crucial to the financial industry. Make all rating 16 to pretension deference to collide with the norm. The legislature define current lenity prevents the CFPB from adding requirements. The law would be made by SEC judges that such attention are title Chevron effectively and the partial law Dodd-Frank strengthen the SEC enforcement. Also providing the same type of authority to CFPB deference to hybrid statutes is important given the breadth of CFPB authority because of hostile regulatory climate. These carry importance for financial industry. Aggressive interpretation of hybrid statutes grow. If the Supreme Court were to rule that the lenity applies to such statutes, aggressive in terms when taken by the CFPB would be difficult to maintain, and the incentive to use it proceeds by diminishing. There's three internal links. First is the SEC Chevron deference to the SEC regs security law specifically for insider trading. Raquel enforcing the SEC can obtain everything by going to court. The SEC chain has come to write the crest of SEC. It's hard to find a better example of administrative creep. The SEC won 100% of its internal hearings, preferring the internal form to the federal courts hinders the balance of securities. The security law's most significant enforcement actions are under anti-fraud provision. These has been judged made. The SEC has resisted any attempt to replace SEC on the theory that the broad provision provides flex major advantages into the law of insider trading have occurred in the Supreme Court. These SEC judges ruling in is titled Chevron deference. When you have years of broad anti-fraud provision historically elaborated by the federal courts, but that under Dodd-Frank could be interpreted by the SEC judges. This would be unfair to litigants in the long run, but might be good for SEC, which has its own reputation when it comes to interpreting security laws. SEC no good administrative fiat, neither good for its own interest nor in the security markets. For the SEC to become a law unto itself, and insider trading collapses the economy. Presto. And 17, the main reason the capital is available is that the investor trusts the U.S. markets to be fair. The market always loses confidence. That would lead investors to exit. The domino effect would ensure that investors leave the market, leading to less invest in the economy as a whole would be affected. Second internal link is IRS tax overreach ensures unpredictability. Decaying deference enables agencies to widely violate their own rulemaking. Shapiro and 18 overall would blush at the IRS that one can follow the line and violate with the same activity. Duquesne creates a broad view of agency power laws. Agencies override their own regulation, then penalize those who violate some unarticulated principles. This continues to understand administrative power via judicial application as the third circuit has gone further, ruling the agency can reinterpret its own ambiguous regulation to mean whatever it wants. Duquesne deference enabled the agency to create, enforce, and adjudicate while ignoring rules. It created the for deference and deprives regulated entities of fair notice. Our expansion allows agencies to convert uncertainty to unpredictability without any warning, and applying the rule of lenity solves that overreach. Meyer and 14 IRS check the Tax Reform Act as an opportunity to slip its sleeve to replace the tools crafted by Congress's own agenda. Prosecutorial zealotry produce a judicial backlash. Institutional bias, clever use clever ambiguity to create interpretation far more extreme territory can act as both a legislator and prosecutor has strong bias to draft regulations, weapon track charges, create administrative tunnel vision. The Supreme Court has suggested that lenity prevents a little more than average spheres. Lenity also apply to penal regulations as well as statutes as an agency acts as a legislator, judge, and prosecutor when it promulgates, interprets, and enforces a regulation under robust lenity. To approach the tax court would withhold deference from penalty regulations. Lenity was grounded in a policy of tenderness, not of the accused. Third internal link, overbroad Chevron deference ensures the perpetual growth of unaccountable and unpredictable financial regulators. Baker and 18 Chevron allows the agencies to run their own authority. Independent agencies have become unaccountable. The involved Sarbanes-Oxley, CFPB, created the PCAOB within the SEC, a regulatory nesting doll, which enforced for presidential control, upholding PCAOB when green like Congress to create a host of similar entities. And the impact is economic growth. Excessive regulatory burdens destroy access to public capital markets, which is crucial to economic strength. That's Tucker and 18. Their power to fuel economic growth made the capital markets the eighth wonder of the world today. That power is in danger. Capital markets have been the entity of drivers of growth. The private capital raises increase. Public markets destroy. There's fewer investment opportunities. High growth companies are never going to be public. Investors are now forced to invest in a dwindling pool. Markets have become a holding pen for sleepy corporations. Decline will diminish the American economy. Access is lifeline. This trend can be traced back to Sarbanes-Oxley when Congress mandates a new regulatory hurdles. Thousands of companies are permanently saddled with expensive regulation. The burden has steered to good companies away from public markets. Excessive regulation is hard. Capital markets extinction. Haas and 17. The burden of maintaining order will fall on the U.S. and no other country has the capacity or mindset. No other country can contend with the global economy, maintain the trading, combat terrorism or disease, or maintain the order in the Middle East and Europe and Asia. In order to lead, the U.S. needs to put its house in order. The U.S. cannot lead if it does not have a strong domestic foundation. Security requires resources. The better the U.S. will do doing economically, the more it will have to do what it needs without igniting distracting debate. To respect for the American model will only increase if it's seen as successful. The most basic test will be growth in range of 3%. In U.S. economic strength solves a global framework for mitigating extinction risk from emerging tech boroughs. Instincting the multilateral system with premise on economically strong U.S. with more going to health and pensions will be less likely for military spending. China could tarnish U.S. invincibility, slow growth, accelerate declines of living standard, making it harder to continue trade. Contrary policy actions are warranted, focusing on weak productivity. That world that will not have the West as an economic powerhouse. The military Congress could envision the U.S. and China with Russia. The U.S. needs to be guiding system as the first among equals. There is no global government system without U.S. leadership. New tech carries papers, geoengineering, synthetic biology, and nanotech. Without rules, there is a major disruption. There is a little alternative global cooperation if one does not want to die. Dog-eat-dog war. Tough economic times have seen the U.S. become distrustful. Multilateral institutions. Conflict would be inevitable, and decline guarantees great power war syndrome. In 19, there are growing concerns about the large-scale military conflict. The current political landscape, economic crisis combined with ethno-populism rhetoric could spin out of control into a world war. The 2008 crisis could cause systemic collapse, but monetary interventions could do little to address economic weakness as monetary tightening checks bubbles. Another economic crisis likely economic distress showcase for future conflicts. Economic challenges are global security threats declined by the U.S. will affect allied confidence, cause regional stability, rivals space, challenge American status, risk associated with stolen WMD, compose a threat, financial trades making weapons vulnerable to threat. Advantage 2 is immigration. Deference to immigration courts within the executive have broken the system there, beset by massive backlogs and arbitrary decisions, only increasing judicial variance. Interpretation solves right now. And 12, the immigration agency cannot fulfill responsibility to deference doctrine to assume the immigration burden with a nearly insurmountable backlog, inexplicable decision, concealed decision making, scandals, biased judges, and unable to meet basic decision making. The problem read like a list of reasons the court should not defer to an agency. Immigration is notorious for inconsistent, inscrutable decision making. Backlog was shifted to federal courts, approximately streamlining the agency's decision to grow more arbitrary and inconsistent. We now have a crisis where the courts are required to step in, but where the courts have less power. We need to go to the courts with strong judicial rules or mitigate problems at the agency in chaos. Disarray. Immigration shows how critical the judicial role and statutory interpretation can be. In recent case law shows a vast swath of immigrants can be removed, but applying lenity solves Soros and 14 Martinez and Kashimuma put vast swaths of residents at risk of being removed without any possible avenue of relief. Any non-citizen who committed to a removable offense cannot apply for cancellation. Judicial oversight and review are necessary in immigration context. The Supreme Court needs to reevaluate the balance between Chevron and lenity. Lenity is a doctrine to be used within Chevron's framework. This would not gut Chevron. The court should view lenity as an underlying principle that review enforced Chevron. The Supreme Court shall rate treatment means the circuit court would be able to better define lenity in Chevron, interact in forms and transforms to Chevron analysis and causes widespread application of lenity in lower court decisions, ensures aggressive review of BIA and USCIS decisions, severely limits deportation. Diebold and 15, the INA creates severe criminal law consequences. The court must clarify for lower courts the role of agency interpretation. Hybrid statutes courts must apply lenity to interpret statutory ambiguity rather than grant Chevron deference. Lenity clears the ambiguity, pretermits agency deference. Lenity enforces fair notice and criminal defense and strikes the proper balance in administering laws that have criminal applicants. Lenity and Chevron are applied sequentially. The criminal rule of lenity is applied before deference is given. The criminal law consequences have a widespread impact. Being legally re-entry cases accounted for 26% of all federal crime sentences. Because courts must apply this, there's no place for deference to the BIA. Deference comes only into play if ambiguity lingers and after the deployment all pertinent interpreted principles. Lenity effectively forecloses agency deference when a statute has criminal application. No gap remains for BIA's interpretation to fill the hole, otherwise would extend the reach of the criminal statute for any other court could accomplish replacing lenity with severity and immigration backlogs and deportation to Disrupt Act. That's Carter 17. The Trump's anti-immigrant strength threaten the mecca drives the produce industry. There is a huge shortage of labor, increasing deportation, making it harder to find workers. There's already a labor shortfall, and farmers can do basic operations. The industry can expect an overall crop production of 6%. The backlog of 610,000 immigration cases. The administration would like to deport more than any previous administration. Is out of touch with the audience in reverse migration to use and seeing farm move south to Mexico and further dealing with giving Mexican growers a chance to put away at the existing markets. Legal risks have a very big impact. Instead of time for farmers and automation not going to come in time. Farmers are going to be left with labor problems. The impact is nuclear escalation in multiple hotspots. Castellan 17. The we face threats posed by civil strife, famine, and refugee challenges. We create incubators for extremist factions. The food security is imperative. The stable price produce more stable countries. Insecurity drives mass migration. The destabilizing population generating complex food systems. Watch the front price volatility to be correlated with the right topical rich strong. Acts unquestionably a requirement for stability, reducing extremism, producing demand for American farmers. Emerging markets purchase 20% of U.S. ag exports and expected to grow population boom is protected the most food insecure country. These deteriorating the shooting wars for rural America. Ag jobs provide opportunity. Core essential for food security. Active support for food security helps stabilize key regions and mitigate terrorism. Thus, the plan the United States federal government should find that the rule of lenity precedes Chevron deference in nearly all administrative agency interpretations of ambiguous sources. The ruling on lenity averts disastrous immigration to agency decision making. Run and 12 strengthen the judicial role and statutory interpretation, shifting Chevron failures of immigration agency means for the court to rethink Chevron. Imagine if the Supreme Court called out the failures of immigration agency reach and need-like decisions. The concluding courts need not to defer the threat of judicial review, force agencies to develop better procedures and clean up their acts. How the court issued a ruling of the sort of the past decade immigration disaster being averted. Doing so would be a prerequisite for any immigration agency to receive deference. The immigration agency failed to pay justice. The Supreme Court resolution a serious decision guaranteed the immigration agency would still receive deference. And the plan's ruling establishes lenity as a rigorous feature of the new court's jurisprudence. Ensures judicial support. Price in 16. The courts we committed to lenity is unfortunate. Next justice should build upon Scalia's groundwork to make lenity a more rigorous feature of the court jurisprudence. Political dynamics surrounding criminal law tend to push towards overbreadth. Court might rank lenity first in the interpretive hierarchy for criminal statutes. Doing so would require a two-step inquiry analogous to Chevron. The such a system might argue the rule of lenity could finally acquire more rights. Scalia could not lead the court over the threshold, but the next justice can. Whoever places Scalia should better entrench lenity as a real interpretive principle that it deserves to be. An expansive executive overreach is structurally inevitable without SCOTUS clarification that lenity trumps deference. Sutton 13 lenity tells court to interpret ambiguous criminal law in favor of defense. Lenity plays no role in regulatory statute. What happens with a hybrid statute? A statute is not a chameleon. Its meaning does not change from case to case. A single law should have one meaning. The court should not defer to an agency. Anti-defendant interpretation of a law backed by criminal penalties. Lenity forbids deference. Lenity forecloses deference to housing departments, crime creating law, or immigration authorities, or the IRS is allowing immigration officers, tax collectors who fill gaps in hybrid criminal laws offends the rule of lenity. Can I use a pen?
I'm setting it right now.
Did you grab the mark?
Before. We'll take a second to grab.
Yeah.
Marked.
Yeah, I'm opening it for myself.
Nice.
So I can answer questions, yeah.
So.
Alright.
I have 929.
Is that accurate? 929.
Yeah. Where's the plan go?
I did it to you, so it's up to you.
What plan?
Oh,
Yeah, who reads plans anymore?
yeah. Okay. So I just want to open the thing.
Yeah.
Did you? Is it like in the stock that you sent?
Yeah.
Oh,
To the
okay.
bottom.
Okay.
Stephen in the document.
Nice. Never see that anymore. Okay. Ambiguous sources of what?
Ambiguous sources of of statutes or regulations. Or
Who determines that?
Statutes and regulations.
The Supreme Court determines whether
Only
they're
the Supreme
ambiguous?
Court can challenge a statute.
What
on
is the
grounds that it's
question?
I'm
ambiguous?
confused by your question. Like, ambiguity comes from the nature of language written into the statutes or regulations. So, typically how Chevron deference would work
Yeah,
in
there's a
quo
two-step
is
thing.
there's a two-step process. The first is whether or not it's a reasonable question of the law. The second is whether or not it's an ambiguous statute or
Okay.
not. The plan creates a previous standard
Okay.
before any of those things,
Yeah,
which
I
begs
got
the
you.
question, if it's a hybrid statute, we apply lenity to
Okay.
that.
What's to stop the Supreme Court from very narrowly interpreting what lenity constitutes?
What do you mean?
What's to stop Kavanaugh from being like lenity means whatever I think it does?
Okay, one justice on the court doesn't
Well, it's a
overturn precedent.
conservative, it's a
Two, we
conservative
read
majority court.
Two, we've read evidence that indicates that it builds upon Scalia's foundation for understanding how to interpret hybrid statutes, which means conservative justices who are textualists are more likely to align with the plan.
So they care more about the Constitution than like their like obvious hatred of immigrants.
Well, one, fiat. Two,
Yeah.
a lot of evidence is in context.
Two, like our evidence is in the context
fiat
of
the
how
word lenity,
textualists.
but just like
No,
not-
we don't fiat the word lenity. We fiat an actual rule that exists within criminal and civil proceedings for
Okay.
determining
Lenity is
whether.
applied in criminal proceedings.
Yeah,
sometimes
like
now.
our whole argument is hybrid statutes exist that are both civil and criminal right now. They are automatically deferred to as civil interpretation
Okay.
and given Chevron deference when the penalties associated with them
Yeah, I
actually
got it.
deserve lenity because they
why
have
not
criminal
just stop all
implications.
deportations to solve Advantage 2?
Because that doesn't solve the secret ability of the INA to kind of create arbitrary, or not the INA, immigration courts to create rules based off the INA to justify deportation.
What's the impact if the deportations don't happen?
They can still create new rules. Like, let's say you ban the current deportations happening, you can't ban it indefinitely for the
durable
future because
fiat.
of secret.
Yeah, we can.
No, you
If
can't
I were
just
to
fiat
counterplan-
that.
If I were to counterplan that has the executive no longer do deportations, do you have an answer that isn't just theory?
We have an answer, but our
Yeah.
evidence about the secret process of immigration courts means that they can always arbitrarily redefine different admission
why would
statutes.
they
and
never
Shore's
efforts
evidence
to
actually
define-
makes
What if we have the
both
court
of
say
these
it?
arguments in context that says that only applying lenity in the context of immigration court decisions can overcome the entire
Yeah, the
legal
court's just saying
problem.
stop deportations doesn't prevent the BIA and USCIS from creating arbitrary languages based off the
What if we
INA.
just fiat those agencies stop
What if we
deporting
just
people?
fiat the world is peaceful? Like, it doesn't work. I've explained multiple times the internal link about the secrecy of immigration courts kind of over-determining
I'm just curious,
those processes.
I'm curious what they do if they can't deport people. Like, what other stuff would they do?
They can't. That's the thing. You can't just ban deportation because of how overlapping statutes within the immigration context work. They are a very secretive process that has no judicial oversight right now
It's
because
also
it's
like
given
backlogs,
future
deterrent,
deference to the
overcoming. It's not just deportations.
Yeah.
It's like a whole, like the first card is like a whole list of all the reasons the immigration court.
Right.
Sorry,
Or
one more second. Just don't get your time.
on this one?
Yeah.
We have 9:15, I think.
Yep.
What'd you say?
We have 9:15 left.
8, advantage 2, advantage 1.
You said immigration and then finance?
Yeah.
Yeah, two.
Is this like broken?
Yes.
One of them it doesn't tighten. Most of them do.
So am I safe?
You will be safe. It's just like only one of the like things, it doesn't. But it will stay. Your turn. Yeah.
Nice.
Everyone good? Cool. Nearly all can be 60% most generous interpretation. Team more 98, 277 sought to describe our language education by dictating speakers be taught nearly all in English, nearly all meaning anywhere between 20 to 40% of instruction being a second language. It's quantifiable. Here are all the agency interpretation cases. That's grade 8. The weekend of the empirical survey of 10,014 Supreme Court cases between Chevron and Hamdan, in which an agency interpretation of a statute was at issue. There are a tiny percentage of that. They're only criminal cases, not even agency interpretations of regulations, let alone nearly all agency interpretations. That's Esker and 2008 insert that chart. In the area means all the activities. UN13 in the area means all the activities of the area. Vote neg 1 limits their targeted deference has for every agency or branch of the military. No bright line wants to ignore nearly all to his ground. Ruling on specific deference decision shifts away from the core controversy of allocating separation of powers. 3, clear meaning the topic is the only predictable guide for a pre-term rep prep. Even if you don't like what it says, next up is the regs good dissent. Court forcing agency action ruins regulatory implementation. Cross 2K review. Disrupts the ability of agencies to regulate when the judge compel action. Even more resource must be dedicated to new statutory interpretation issues. Judicial review likewise may disrupt the careful plan of agency action. Agency forcing the most problematic agency disruption. Judicial intention to compel regulation protect public health at the same intent of undermining these same goals. That a court deciding cases almost inevitably consider the issues of a particular case independently out of context where it's unable to understand the complex interdependencies much less addressed than the judge and a slightly complex ongoing situation just far enough and just long enough to pull a crucial breakout and then scamper some way, leaving it to the rest of the scenario. The world does not fall down. That causes cascading disaster, specifically pandemics. Chem17. The result could be it could also be economic catastrophe. Fuck this dissent, I think, because it's
just.
Well, no, because this thing also
Yeah, you're right.
is for the same reason as that other term.
Agreed.
Fuck this dissent. Gerrymandering. The Supreme Court is forced to overrule partisan gerrymandering. Robert Siskiyou will overrule now to depoliticize the court. Kirkland, the 19th constitutional questions that can clerk of the judge want to impose limits to some of the flow of cases. Vicuña said the facts are about as egregious as the court will ever see. Plaintiffs have a strong standing. Vicuña said they intentionally built the case by standing issues. Kimberly said he feels cautious optimism about his process. The maneuvering was not for his there's an interest in doing something substantive here. These pending registering cases are burdening their case. When Robert is keen to maintain the court's proceeding independence in a hyper-partisan environment and a hyper-partisan movement. Robert doesn't want to see the court as a parking lot for political cases. He needs a balance of work case law restricting executive authority, forces the court to limit other precedents. Farragon and 2. It is difficult for the court to leave political actors. Clauses granting powers to the executive have been laid down unlimited discretion by the political branches with the War Power Treaty power and foreign affairs power generally. The intrusions remain modest as based on the area of judicial deference. The court is responsive to perception of vulnerability and punishment rumblings from Capitol Hill. Lead the court to retreat. Gerrymandering locks in polarization and destroys democracy. Class in 17. There was one silver bullet that could fix American democracy is getting rid of gerrymandering. Average electoral margin was 37.1% of agreed dispatch from Russia. Gerrymandering is why American democracy was broken on competitive districts of a course to affect democracy. There's no incentive to compromise. There's no real risk of losing in general. The people proceed to change position. The key source of a gridlock. The SC will rule and it can transform democracy. The candidate can side with the liberal minority. The longer the we allow our distance to be hijacked. The closer we ensure the death of American democracy. Nuke war. Kagan 17.
DPT solves war. Read another impact card later.
Okay, DPT solves war. Read another impact card later. Topicality restricts us to confine with the limits. American Heritage Dictionary 2K. To keep it confined with limits. That means to forbid action. That's Google.com. A dictionary. A limit is a limit or a level beyond which something may not pass. Restrictions or prohibitions includes monitoring and supervision. Schneider Brown and 12 definition of restrictions does not include monitoring or reporting and supervising class out of restrictions. Limitation of information and content supervisor can have oversight. Definition is very different. Control agreed. Definitions that do not restrict vote negative. 1 limits any congressional action can inconvenience the president prohibiting action. The only bright line core. 2 ground the core controversy is structural change. Read on the separation of powers and formal boundaries. 3 bidirectionality oversight transparency. Ask law the Congress to encourage executive power. Next up is the USMCA decided bill passed by PC's Key Gomez 313. In order to achieve bipartisan support, the White House will lift its race attempt to recapture legislative of CJR. Trump officials have been meeting with Democrat leaders to get bipartisan support. They're organizing intensive meetings to build support. He'll be signing the agreement for ratification. Plan kills PC because losers lose. That's Lewis inside declining authority. Encourage defection. The perception matters. Reputation for success below. I believe the office is on the defense can lead to disaster. Losers lose. Failure begets failure. Allies believe you can see benefit which reinforces perception. The feedback loop accelerates decay. Decay in the capacity and deflection of key allies. USMCA is key to US Act and global food security. That's Duval. In 2022, USMCA further increased our exports at the time. Is in the South of Economic Challenge for Agriculture. The Congress ratified this trade deal. Now the USMCA also includes measures that address cooperation and formal sharing of the trade rules that could prevent trade barriers based on how plants are bred. America's farmers depend on trade barriers. Famine kills billions. Brown 5. And for a much of humanity, food security, much more important issues to the billion who lives on 70% of income on food. Even a modest rise in price can quickly become life-threatening. Next up is the advantage counterplan. The United States government should strike down existing immigration restrictions, strike down the INAs, unconstitutional, appropriate funds to create 1,000 new immigration courts, stop all deportations, deny certiorari to all immigration cases, and defund immigrations and custom enforcement. It obviously solves advantage 2 because it creates all the resources and it stops deportation. That was in cross-ex pretty clear. Next up is the counterpoint. The United States Federal Judiciary should affirm the constitutionality of our deference and KISS or Wilkie. The United States Federal Government should establish a congressional regulatory office in charge of cost-benefit analysis and to ensure that the rule of lenity proceeds. Chevron deference in nearly all administration agencies, interpretation of ambiguous sources, and allow administrative agencies to entrenched regulations by creating a menu of entrenchment options, including at least permanent regulations. The United States federal government should substantially increase the independent resources for federal agencies, increase the total number of career track professionals or congressional staff, overturn Citizens United and pass campaign finance reform, substantially increase antitrust enforcement to reduce non-competition in all economic sectors. The CRO builds congressional capacity for oversight and can ensure regulations conform to congressional intent. That's Wallach in 16. Congress must soon face up to also control regulatory policy, making commitment to capacity building uniform, immediately restored by no means with this until a complete reversal in which Congress becomes capable of deciding every question. What will the CRO do? CRO as a decent target for development. The office have two functions. First, would perform cost-benefit analysis. These would coincide with the estimates of the agency before the assessment of regulation should be posted and delivered to the community. Second, have the CRO perform analysis supported by real data. They would identify redundancy, facilitating rewrites of the Congress without the CRO. I think case applied by lobbyists, crafting narratives that are self-serving and key to guarding CRO independence and being lack of it would be the staff of civil servants and CRO representing the Congress and capacity to play meaningful role for service and onto the agenda. CRO is working on objection to the agenda. A CRO funding, a study funding, a deficiency criteria, mandatory congressional consideration, take responsibility for rule. CRO's assessments give deep by the APA. The enforcement would be illegal challenges to strike down. The ruling is insufficient, increasing resources for agencies and Congress to process information, counteracts corporate capture. Tell us in 15. There's one other form of accountability organization that the state itself in places to reflect the pathology of agency capture, the architects of the consumer financial protection for our attempts to prevent its capture by giving it an independent source of revenue. We should focus instead on the great solution for which is focusing on recruiting and retaining talented individuals as efficient as one way to insulate agencies with constant circulation of individuals brings the cultures of both dangerously close. We should consider giving sensitive agencies additional resources. We have a dramatically congressional staff. This ensures the Congress has reliant expertise of lobbyists who represent threat seekers. The Congress should increase the permanent staff. Next up is the K. Political engagement is a distraction from the noble path. The affirmative external attachments can only breed suffering and chaos. More 14 Buddhism diagnosed big system itself as being the main source of social conflict politics. A tremendous waste of time to allow the ego to run rampant. Time appears to be cyclical. It will happen again and again. The larger cosmic cycle itself repeats. Life is suffering caused by clinging. One can stop suffering in front. Started clinging. One can stop clinging by living. The noble pathological leaders are powerless to improve society. Politics is irrelevant to the truly important things in life. Somebody has to run the society, but it needn't be you. The impact, extinction, and all suffering. Moral do you rule to reject the acts, external attachment. Seagull 15. To cultivate compassion actions that affect our moral materialism. That can't be empirically proven. Buddhist clarifies our relationship with all beings. Our fragile species lurches toward extinction. Our moral imperfections not let us muddle through something very much like Buddhist ethics. Seems urgent for the to make sufficient progress. Advantage 2. No food impact. Maker 11. Hunger and shortages are common in sub-Saharan countries such as Malawi. Zambia, Tanzania, but wars involving them are not the Dust Bowl cause plenty of deprivation, but no civil war. What temperatures have been rising in Africa the past 15 years? Civil wars and war has been falling. The pressure on access to land can certainly cause skirmishes, but a war requires the hostile forces to be organized and armed. That depends on more on the influence of bad governance, closed economies, built from ideology, than availability and aggression. Conflict thesis found the conflict is more like if the country has spoken down on itself for shortages of degradation. Reviewing analysis examined a large number of countries within share and concluded that those who we seem to because of scarcity and conflict have very little support. Advantage 1.
Is silly because we don't export.
Cast law is stupid because we don't export our food. China is not dependent on U.S. food exports. We don't export food to ISIS or North Korea, which are the only other impacts. Russia's economy is already in the tank, which proves that there's no uniqueness in there are alternative causes. Advantage 1. Economic decline increases cooperation. Davis 17. Under conditions of economic crisis, states accept overstrain. Decision to also contribute to rights and individual incentives to self-restraint. Toward partners and similar economic control with the government leads to repercussion that their own production may have on partners when they cannot afford to treat one institution to provide a venue for cooperation and formal mechanisms of legal rule. The crisis generate pressure for state bringing more. Less cooperation, growth, and sustainable and innovation can solve a shifting away from productivism, mosquito, avoid extinction. 17. Growth is intertwined with an optimistic view, ingenuity, solve problem, GDP, increase in deep natural disasters, accidents, that resource inputs and non-renewable generates waste that deserve ecosystems, severely threatening human planetary functioning in the short term. Euro will decrease reducing incentives to investment recovery, peak oil demand, increases would impact growth, climate change, and accelerate the near future growth, threatens soil, water, and forest ecosystem services, purification, air and water market, mitigation of droughts and floods, detox of waste, pollination, pest control, research identify thresholds beyond which life on Earth will be put at risk. Important to consider the EKC did not take into account the difference between relative and absolute decoupling. There's no evidence for absolute decoupling due to rebound effects and impacts that occur outside the country and development of alternative models that do not depend on growth. Research since growth threatens the ability of the Earth to support life. Crisis now solves the transition. More rock and all in 60 of the growth. Fend off the most radical systemic change development will inevitably lead to crisis. Mortar start solution to reinforce the lock and reinforce and result in further problems that transfer control to market diminishes possibility for policy adding to breathless complexity and lock in the crisis that influences social transformation. Facing the broader economic transition of deeper underlying social changes. The crisis fundamentally changes the dominant conditions and directly grounded theory of transformative social innovation. Crisis triggers transformative changes. Growth-oriented AI causes extinction, but degrowth orientation solves Puyo. And it changes sustainability and superintelligence. Non-independent superintelligence can be affected by socioeconomic contexts which develop neoliberalism as for shaping current policies and sharp contracts to degrowth through superintelligence. Fly the capitalist markets could have very undesirable consequences for humanity and the whole bias. Neoliberalism is creating a very special breeding ground for superintelligence. Neoliberal policies are actively transferring decisions to markets. Automated governance is foundational interest goals are shaped partly by the firms themselves. Growth is thought to rely on earnings. Therefore, economic selection can be expected to favor firms with those are greater technical constraints to be overcome. But then, with asymptotically advanced technology, i.e., with extreme AI aligned for extreme technological development and other fields of scenarios not defined by contingent goals, addresses of AI's goals by programmers. Their goals emerge from large sets of entities subject to capitalistic goals of interaction and economic selection outweighs the after-action 18. The probability and seriousness of AI failures increase over time. The AI is extremely powerful and completely unpredictable. Millions of times so powerful that nuclear weapons existence could create multiple individual global risks, most of which we cannot currently imagine. The sheer number of possible failure roads suggests that there are more to come.
Good.
Yep.
Status of everything.
Conditional.
Can you pick blanks?
Yes.
Okay. Net benefits to the advantage counterclaim?
The net benefit to the advantage counterclaim is the politics DA, the stuff on the case, impact turns the other.
For politics DA is what you mean by that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the stuff on the case, because it doesn't solve the econ advantage.
Sure, but you get rid of all immigration restrictions and massively increase the amount of workers who come into the U.S., why doesn't that mean
You haven't read a card that does good for the economy? Like, there's a wages debate to be had. It's
come
not
on,
like
Drew, you have a brain. Like,
it's not strictly obvious that that would be the case.
Okay, the CRO counterplan net benefits.
The CRO counterplan net benefits are the counterplan doesn't have the court restrict separation of powers, so both the other dissent about both politics dissent and the gerrymandering dissent are net benefits.
So both politics DA. The T prohibit argument post-plan agencies no longer are prohibited from receiving deference if they are interpreting a hybrid statute. We meet.
They aren't prohibited from receiving all deference.
Does that mean
that would mean that the court?
I have a second question. Does that mean the only topical AF on the deference portion of the topic is non-delegation?
Well, if you couple that with nearly all, then yes.
Okay.
Or if you couple that
yeah,
with...
I wonder how you couple those things. What does prohibit nearly all mean? Like, why doesn't that just feed back into your subsets argument?
I'm confused about your question. So, like,
yeah,
our thing operates independently. Your AF is not a prohibition because the rule of lenity is a standard of review. It does not say that the agency receives zero deference.
I'm asking, you've said the topic stem says all or nearly all. What does it mean to prohibit nearly all?
To prohibit nearly all is to impose a prohibition on nearly all cases in which deference occurs. But your
nearly
AF is not a prohibition on any of them. Nearly all is at least 60%, I think.
Yeah, so that, I want to go to there now. That piece of evidence says 60% win rate. Why should we focus on win rates as our justification for topicality?
What do you mean? This is the
graph you've inserted.
This is the number of
this
is the number of times the deference is accorded to agencies.
Is based off of win rates.
No, we're not studying the win rate column. We're studying the percentage of cases in population column.
How many
but also win rate
statutes are there in the United States?
Huh?
How many hybrid statutes are there in the United States?
I don't know.
That is not
perfect.
It's also that doesn't matter because it's
the
the number of cases. Because the topic is about acts of deference.
The USMCA DA. Why does the Supreme Court making a ruling somehow piss off Democratic support?
Because Trump takes the L on immigration.
Why does that?
Why does Trump taking the L on immigration affect his ability to leverage
the L? Like, Trump's not the one interpreting.
You think Trump has no vested interest in agencies implementing his immigration agenda? That obviously affects his political capital if we win the thesis of losers lose, which is what this card says.
He doesn't have to push anything. Is it just that he just looks weak?
He takes a loss. That makes him look weak.
Yemen, Russia sanctions, all of those things.
Spoiler will counterplan out of a lot of that, but also, like, that thing doesn't matter.
You have to counterplan out of the.
Well, like, nothing is. The Mueller report is a nothing burger. He hasn't been convicted. He's spinning it as vindicating him, but also we're going to counterplan out of a bunch of that stuff.
report comes out during this debate. Good.
Yeah, because Barr is
No, we will not do that.
apparently sending the memo in like 30 minutes to Congress.
At any point in the
Strike it.
we will use negative fiat. I don't care if it's the 2 and
There's no neg res though.
Is everyone good for the order? Yeah. Advantage 2, advantage 1. Substantial to restriction. The advantage counterplan that creates 1,000 new immigration courts and does other stuff. The CRO counterplan. Buddhism. Gerrymandering. USMC. Anyone already? Cool. Immigration advantage there, internal link defense is really old. Doesn't assume the magnitude of our internal links is key to global backdrops because there's massive deportations existing in the status quo that destroyed thousands of backdrops. The basis for our entire U.S. Is the basis for our entire ag sector. It's key to the global economy because the U.S. exports 20% of its food to developing countries. Hospitals are uniquely likely to escalate places like the Middle East and in Central Africa right now because there's no tempering international bodies to secure conflict, mass deportations. This is an all-cost thing. The advantage counterplan can't solve. We don't export to ISIS. That's obviously not the internal link. They have no evidence for this Russia econ and the trash stuff, which means that their guess is a terminal impact to escalation. For the finance advantage stuff, there's too many internal links. The one I see for them to go for deep economic strength is key to check is key to multilaterals of U.S. leadership. The only way to assert maintenance of the global order, which checks revisionist powers. Russia, China counterbalancing plates like the SES and Russia building Pakistani to the status quo. Only U.S. strength is key to check it. It's key to as a framework for collective action problems with emerging tech, which can cause extinction. The impact is unpredictable, so you should default to because we don't know what the impact of emerging techs will be. They've considered that 2019 is worse because the 2008 crisis undermined monetary flows and mean that the economy is fragile. The next collapse will be much worse, which all of their impact defense assume the main evidence is that it causes loose streaks because there's no safeguards on getting nuclear weapons to terrorists, which guarantees extinction. There's no transition. People will always return to the economic and competitive mindset after safety nets, which the administrative state is key to, which are the thesis that their links are. The dissads are right that the F is key to consumption mindset, sustainable and good pike and predator, and 18 innovation market forces are part of the solution. Like capitalist economies will reform our future economies, supporting state to build downscaling state of the force of the only solution. The compensation for resource posture, behavior change, consumers and capture products that demand are indispensable. Radical innovation to overcome fossil fuels. Another paradigmatic shift is in the era. Innovation would ever have been established if not a consumers have not been leveraged by their purchasing power. Several new sectors will emerge. Already 60 sectors will be momentum adjustments of institutions to consumer habits will accompany these. There are numerous relations giving further mental digitalization allows to replace many industries, head services, investment, growth, replacement, crucial upper front, new investment opportunities, thereby bringing available liquidity to productive use, accelerates the paradigm shift, reactions, for example, fuel efficient engines are advantageous. They pursue the same environmental objectives will provide more time to develop new tech, only continuing growth and clean innovation over its extinction by alienating the world will come to an end. That's the conclusion of degrowth ingenuity. Markets are well on the way toward making batteries relevant. Renewable costs are sooner will be lower than fossil fuels. Nuclear can supply all of the energy the world will need. Battery powered vehicles will replace transit peak costs not hand in reserve for the last 260 years. Total resources for the last over 1140 years. Researchers endeavor crops to use us while maintaining yields by creating nitrogen and official stable that decrease yields while reducing use of few crops. Make their own fertilizer from air, water, drought resistant, and saline tolerant crops to help humanity has already reached peak farmland. Nearly 400 billion hectares will be restored. Animal farming will be replaced rather than degrowth. The planet needs more and faster growth. China's already investing in AI massively right now. There's no internal link to global growth, which means we don't trade off with that. No impact guys in 15 Boston acknowledged that theoretically optimal intelligence that makes optimal use of available information will forever remain unattainable. It's too computationally demanding in any physical computer postulated. Super intelligence seem uncomfortably close to this computational barrier to the perfect Bayesian agent impossible. There's far more to intelligence than a mechanical alternative to neurons, and the history of AI suggests that super intelligence is a practical impossibility. T substantial. We apply to interpretations of all ambiguous statutes because it applies the rule of lenity before Chevron. Substantial means considerable in amount. Specific numbers are arbitrary, especially when establishing standards. Person for substantial means considerable, but not the sense of place. Specific number cutoff may be substantial. One situation may not be another. The breadth of other kinds of Congress, but clearly establishing a standard for the Commission's own difference in its center of substantial counter-interpretation areas. Approximately Cambridge Dictionary, of subject, a subject or activity or a part of it. In means within. Dictionary.com notate in used to indicate inclusion within. There's no finite cutoff for nearly all, and it's unpredictable. Terry 98. The loss is nearly all. Many districts are using 40% and 60% districts to find nearly all of its spectrum. There's a lot of confusion, but it generally reserves a notable exception. Hook 2K nearly all is used because a notable exception may be contained. There's an arbitrary disadvantage in their interpretation. Pre-run preface guided by literature. They have no evidence that it tends to limit IVF artificially. Limiting up topic creates a moral hazard. Distorts our understanding of the controversy, which undermines after preparation for all debating makes us burden because it forces us to win rates changes, not difference, which makes T a question of solvency and does not the question of the resolution. You should default to reasonability, competing interpretation, create a race to the bottom to limit out the affirmative. T restriction. We prohibit deference to agency interpretations of statutes without applying levity to counter interpretation. Restriction means limit or qualification. CAA and a restriction is not defined in the absence of statutory definition. We don't consider the words being determined by the legislator intended obvious meaning restrictions, limitation, or qualification wagers. Or restricted when they are limited by interlocking requirements. Use prohibited from driving any vehicle not equipped. The rules dictate the restriction restriction includes device limitations. Agency interpretations are the executive power of repeal. At 17 would agency make rules that exercise executive power. Any talk to the contrary is listed and provides you can cross-apply all of our defense, the over-limiting arguments and reasonability arguments. They make the affirmative efficient and barrel for the negative, especially the NDT, because they limit to one overly sweeping after per area. They also make the topic incoherent. Nearly all proof they read contradictory definitions, which magically change the way you would evaluate offense in this debate. Means you should default to reasonability. The advantage counterplan that does 1,000 new immigration courts. It doesn't solve because it doesn't solve any ineptitude of our conceded our internal links means they can't go for this. It doesn't solve the reason that BAA courts are able to make their own arbitrary decision in the status quo and massively deport immigrants. It still deters immigrants from coming to the U.S. in the first place, which destroys our ag sector because there's no recruiting of those people. Which means that there's hundreds of thousands of jobs in ad blocks. Just creating 1,000 new immigration courts is hilarious, but makes the internal link worse. That was on the case debate because it proves that because the system is totally fucked in the status quo. It links to net benefit because it changes because all of the changes to the social stuff means it links to court politics. The perception of those changes and how significant they are in the agenda means that it links to the agenda. Permutation to both solves the net benefit. There's no discernible one. Conditionality is a voting issue. It gives the negative non-reciprocal double terms that make the 2AC impossible and prevent depth. There's no solvency advocate for the counterplan. It's impossible to predict. Unlimited fiat makes justifies the 1NC being 9 minutes of counterplans, which means the new F doesn't justify their abuse. The advantage counterplan links to DDEV, allowing immigrants in boost growth. We might have, which is the 1AC evidence. All our evidence says that it's key to thousands of jobs and key to things like manufacturing. The CRO counterplan. It's not about the statutes being ambiguous, which is that interpretation can't solve any of the It's that hybrid statutes in the status quo, which have both civil and criminal penalties, are only interpreted as civil in the status quo. The plan by applying penalty makes them be evaluated as criminal. Congress can't apply criminal penalties because that's court ground. Permutation to both shields the link to the net benefit. No net benefit. I think they were supposed to read the agency flexus at it. Obviously links to all the other net benefits because Congress act and create a regulatory office, which is unpopular if the thesis of their link is true. It can't solve any of the F because the entrenchment and menu of options is the justification for agencies to flip-flop in the status quo, which is the justification for things like IRS overreach and SEC flip-flopping in the status quo, which are the first two internal links that they conceded on advantage one. Increasing resources links to the app because of all the reason that agencies are messed up now is based on deference. It's not about corporate capture, but the incompetence within the agencies and the Trump administration. Overturning Citizens United means they link to core politics and the campaign finance of solve the agency overreach reasons that are causing things like tax havens to exist in the status quo. Buddhism framework, okay, must prove the implications of the plain text are worse than the status quo or competitive all anything else unpredictably shifts focus from the controversy allows the negative monopolies prep and undermine preparation for all the base lack of classroom saving education impact makes it impossible devise political strategies. The alt doesn't solve cultivating empathy is less moral than util bloom to 14 empathy. I'm against a future to make it a poor granting policy. Empathy is bias we feel by attractive people and those who look like us. Empathy is narrow. It is incentive numerical differences. Statistical data. Public decision should be more once we put empathy aside policy to prove and we appreciate that 100 deaths are worse than one of them. We acknowledge the life of someone in a faraway country is worth as more. It's worth as much as the life of the neighbor. Market neighbor perm do both. They link to themselves as all their extinction impacts are double terms with the K of avoiding suffering because they try to avoid suffering or distance from suffering. It's obviously a problem endemic to debate. They don't solve it and actually make it worse by vilifying attempts to engage compassionately with the world and others. Subject to inherent is a problem dealing with suffering from a distance. What could political action be given the fact that suffering does occur at a distance? Not every struggle can be taken on with equal commitment. Speech is action. One can commit by taking a step by speaking to others. We recognize that speech must be understood as a form of action. Baudrillard was the distinction to raise extreme political action and arms like concern by empathy. We must make the attempt to be committed and engaged subject. We live in an imperfect world, so we must contend with the spectacle of stuff. Suffering may end with a commitment to involvement, altruistic commitment to causes market. It causes the gerrymandering. It won't be dismantled. Bill has the 319 with Republicans and for control of the Supreme Court. The outcomes of partisan gerrymandering case are preordained. The court will almost certainly vote 5-4 to hold that such gerrymandering cannot be dismantled by federal court. Chevron's not liberal or conservative. It's technical. Be written intent. There is no stable coalition for a particular version of Chevron. Dr. Scalia has voted against deferring while Alito's conservative. He voted 4 times the liberals in favor of deferring. There's no predictable line down Chevron. The traditional association or acting case after case. The court's decision breaks along liberal conservative lines and the merits. Almost every divided opinion. The voting pattern reflects the divides on the merits of the case rather than on Chevron. Tons of controversial cases coming that thump the dissent. 320 big agenda partisan issues. This sets the gerrymander. The Second Amendment, abortion are bearing down on the court like a ship with black sails. I'm not optimistic that the majority will defy Republican orthodoxy. The court will emerge as a live political issue. Normal means that the plans in June, Lind in 18, a ruling could be expected before the end of the court's term in June. The court's recent tradition of waiting until the end of the term to rule on its highest profile cases. The link evidence isn't about the plan. No reason Roberts has to apply. Or if the planner has to be controversial to apply for. If he actually does balance capital, he vote liberal on another upcoming decision. He's not a swing vote. Writer in 18. Roberts is a very swing. Liberals cannot hope that Roberts will sway votes for their causes. He's very rarely voted for liberals and has proven solidly conservative on major issues. Roberts involved 800 decision. Only 15 was Roberts over the middle. What do you call swing Justice Johnson swing? When you get rid of the case where he sided with 2 conservative black Roberts swings dropped to 5 cases. If he has any judicial capital, he used it to strike down independent redistricting commissions with straight turns to the dissent case in 19 to 2015. Kennedy holding the voters have the right to establish independent redistricting commission. The on the legislative given to Roberts because the Constitution gives the power to set election rules to say legislative votes had unlawfully usurp legislative power. Roberts were in a passion to send this question come back before the court. Should Roberts choose to spend his capital in this way? He could reverse the court's very recent precedent. This would be profoundly troubling to say voters cannot offer a solution. The court will be ruling the legislature may choose their voters and there's nothing that voters can do about it. Judicial PC fake register 97 the liberal pie theory makes no sense because the fungibility of capital doesn't work with reality how people feel about individuals should not be determined by federalism. What the Supreme Court says about federalism will have little, if any, effect. Anything Trump is doing now is an obviously an all-cause of democracy that overwhelms the app that they can't solve. The USMCA dissent. Courts are above political will black. There's no link. Trump appointments. Proof Mazzoni 18 absent in Congress. Any result that the Supreme Court would be brought to heel by constitutional amendment. The court does not rule in ways that offend Congress or their constituents to invest political capital. The court has very little fear from Congress. Targeted rulings not to impose new regulations. Even the most modest proposals fail to advance. The court is about politics. 2017 suggests that the court may also be about politics in the sense that its rulings are largely immune to political response and Regis unilateral withdrawals illegal and will be litigated. The economist in 18 threatening choice by the USMCA and after he will face legal challenges over his authority to withdraw from a trade deal without Congress. It won't pass. Numbers and PC can't overcome those reasons. Rodriguez 313 which can't get the voters needed. USMCA is expected to confront complaints across the spectrum. Disagreement with policies goodwill will not be enough, especially in the House. the administration has been doing much time to pull for vote remains in flux. The administration has submitted their national border funding and cuts of safety nets could complicate USMCA steel and aluminum tariffs. Must be resolved before a vote. It can't overcome other all causes to ag. Only the Afghan inside U.S. trade through 7 gates from the USMCA would be significantly offset with an ag decrease of nearly $10 million due to retaliatory tariffs and lost market share caused by the TPP. USMCA is really dwarfed by these retaliatory measures.
The losers lose link is obviously non-unique. Yemen,
Yep.
Russia.
Losers lose link is not unique. Checks on Trump and the status quo. Yemen resolution proves Congress is backlashing against him. Yeah.
You good?
Yeah.
So you read a bunch of, this Pica and Pretner card has a bunch of lines about how there are innovations that are occurring within the current economy, which we agree with. The only warrant for why a degrowth economy would not contain innovation seems to be this line that says, no innovation would have ever been established if it had not attracted consumers' interest and if it had not been leveraged by their purchasing power, which is facially incorrect. We have NASA, we developed GPS without any consumer demand, the military did it. What's the reason why there wouldn't be any innovation in a post-degrowth economy?
So just like because there's agencies and stuff like that doesn't mean that the market isn't an important consideration and all those things. That's not true.
Why did we didn't go to the
We didn't
moon for
develop
profit.
space just like for funsies.
The
Okay.
government hired out private companies to help make all of those things. The private companies were
The
willing to do
market-
so because they got grants for profit.
The market is the only way to have a scalable solution to all of those.
Well, the Soviet Union also went into space. It's just like, I don't know.
Yeah,
This
yeah, space.
seems kind of I'm just giving an example of like innovation, but sure, fine. You have a
For
bunch
the
of
context of
this card
World
also
War
makes a bunch of other
II,
examples about how there would be new technologies that create more efficiencies. Or one kind of agrees with this, but then it goes a step further and says that none of that resulted in absolute decoupling. What's the warrant for that?
So I'm not sure what the distinction. So the distinction.
The distinction is per
Let me-
person
let me-
consumption.
I know. So
you do know,
absolute
okay,
decoupling increases, or when you say that there's no absolute decoupling, that just means that there is increased energy use in the future. Our argument
Right.
is that energy use is more efficiently and less.
Right, but why wouldn't
durably-
that more efficiency mean more energy, like the rebound effect?
Well, energy is not the same thing as emissions.
So,
That's what I'm saying.
like,
What's
we
your
have other
question?
impacts than warming.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, okay, so you solve emissions
We're
using a bunch of like new
cards
stuff that you
with
made
other
up.
like non-warming stuff. This is in context of warming.
So this
The
is
impact
only in
term
context,
degrowth
these new
for
innovations
warming.
only solve global warming. Okay, sure, cool. Bailey is a science correspondent for Reason Magazine, who is like the Cato Institute of, the economy. Why should we care what they say? And what is this based on?
So the Bailey evidence is a critique of a study by somebody named O'Neill, and cites a bunch of data in this like block of text.
I know what it is,
Yeah.
but why? Like, where
So
does
it talks about like the correlations between GDP per capita as well as carbon
based
dioxide
on what
emissions.
numbers? Like, where did this come from?
I'm not sure where these.
I see the USGS stat about peak phosphorus and how we can mine a bunch of like phosphorus from the ground, but like, what about other
It's
things?
like a host of statistical reports to point to one. It doesn't make sense because it's a
It
literature
cites
review.
Rockefeller University research.
It's not a literature review. It's a
It cites
hit piece
Rockefeller
on an
University
it's a hit
research
piece on an
Jesse
ecological
Hospital.
economist.
It cites.
Who seems way more qualified. He's like a prof at Leeds University. Like, why should we trust this person over that person?
What person? The Jesse person.
The Dan O'Neill guy that your person
Well,
says that
that's
this person's
who is
writing.
critiquing.
Right, I understand, but like they're way more qualified than your author.
Yeah, we've
Okay,
read evidence
sure.
about why they've cherry-picked statistics and backed up with other statistics about why those things are true.
Okay, well, bro.
Sure.
9:15.
No, I don't think they're going to. No.
see. Got it.
Does anybody have any $1 bills?
I think I do.
Sweet. Oh, hey, how's it going? What are you? I've only got 180 though, so find me later. I'll meet you back.
I got you, no problem.
$1 dollar?
I have 20, but.
I'm trying to get some in there. We'll share with you.
Ooh, sweet. I have enough coins.
Oh, you have the coins. I want to take one. What? We'll come back to this.
Word. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Okay. CRO counterplan. Buddhism. Gerrymandering. USMCA. I'm not gonna say it.
Wait,
You can't make me say that word.
Zero Buddhism.
CRO, Buddhism, gerrymandering, the U.S. Mexico Canada agreement. No, actually, I'm not doing that one. Then I'm going to read a lot of DDEP cards. So advantage 1.
So no, you.
I don't know what that is. I am including. Sorry,
Weird time to take a stance.
I am including the USMCA DA in my order. I am
Okay.
taking that argument in this speech.
So the Gaz DA is definitely.
Man.
Let me get my lot of DDEV cards filled up.
I'm actually gonna grab a separate page.
Yeah, that's. I don't know. It's like they're all painted and like I'm kind of slow, so it's probably not gonna be a lot, but like a medium amount. Whatever.
I'll try to out-current you with 1 AR.
It's gonna be a lot. It's gonna be a lot.
Are we all good to go? Okay.
No.
CRO counterplan, perm not going for it, no offense. Buddhism, perm not going for it, no offense. Gerrymandering, June, no PC, not swing vote, but concede alt causes to democracy, means they can't signal U.S. liberal order impact on the econ thing. USMCA, alt causes, no court link, but alt causes to ag obviously screws the second advantage because it's about tariffs and the U.S. ag industry losing a bunch of money. DDEP. Try to die 50 growth, overshoot causes climate change, destroys soil, water, and forest functioning, undermines pollination, pollination, and pest control. That combined effect overwhelms ecosystem resilience, flips growth through the combined rising commodity prices and causing extinction. That's the biggest cook evidence. Everything at every level of the turn, you are cognitively predisposed to neglect warming impacts, exaggerate decline impacts, and underestimate alternative. That's Wells 19 cognitive biases, a distorted perception of climate threat, immediate anchoring, but the models run. Today, the ambiguity starts people are uncomfortable contemplating uncertainty and accept less outcomes, automation bias, the most destructive bias, effective health, endowment effect. We suffer from overconfidence and optimism. AI impact, growth-oriented AI outweighs any affirmative impacts. They've considered that we solve it. One is magnitude nuclear war might kill most people on Earth, but only AI is powerful enough to hunt down every single person. That's the church and evidence. Second is scope. Unlike nuclear war, AI would eat the Earth itself and spread to the whole universe. That's church and 18. JVC humans as a threat may preserve human ways of life would be more expensive than preserving the whole planet Earth. AI could lose out material from Earth through constructed ice material or material shivering could convert the whole planet into a copy turning of the large-scale space engineering by requiring dismantling the Earth. That would destroy all cosmic matter. Outweighs Draper 15. The eternal spark of consciousness is slowly barked into or far that would finally consume the universe and solve our ancient shall this orbit will be satisfied in the events. The expansive cosmic matter collapses around 2040 computers simply eliminate the need for human conduct. As soon as that instead of existence, there are more intelligent aliens than people. AI would destroy them, which outweighs that sort of 19. Extraterrestrial life either exists or not, so lacking specific information we should certainly believe makes strides with advances in astrobiology. Offer many reasons for cautious belief. There's no way out unless one is creationist who believe that humanity originated by divine supernatural act. There's exactly zero probability of genesis occurring elsewhere. No naturalistic utilitarian calculus we complete if it does not take extraterrestrial intelligence into account. Third, growth-oriented AI will assume a hegemonic exploitative position within society that guarantees that humanity is either enslaved or destroyed. That's Puyo 18. First, strictly liberal paradigm government severe markets and will be increasingly automated, automated firms good coordinated. That does not mean that with the person certainly would occur the system further from any human plan uncritical manner such mutations could prevent hostile superintelligence. Marxists believe that society is not by one social class to be the burden of new hegemonic classes. The bourgeois would have displaced a cousin. Then the expression of proletarian to displace the bourgeois. However, the bourgeoisie represented advancing info and processing it. Unlike the proletariat, it has a better position to become hegemonic entities. There's nothing like looking superintelligence in the service needle can be seen as a rubric for Kafkaesque order in which humans are absent or exploited for no purpose. The first argument is the multilateralism impact. That is wrong for the arguments on the other page. There's no answer in the 2AC to the Davis and Pelican, but it's on point, which says that economic decline causes leaders to turn inwards and cooperate with one another because they don't want to lose the few resources they do have. Rising challengers do not impact the global order. That's staying 19 regional resilience may be more important than ever as long as those regional blocks are rule-based. Thus, order may be more stable than an order with one center. The key is not one rule maker, but each region has rules. There are few orders on counter impacts. Americana
The new orders by another hegemon cannot be easily substantiated. The EU and China might have a constructive the role warming the rise of countries and regime change, the rise of ethnic nationals, and more partnerships may be critical. That solves the impact. I can be 18 liberal characteristics are to be likely to persist. Even though the Trump have very serious questions, there may be given deeper source of continuity. Other orders not require hegemonic combination. PCR is wrong. Institutions have a more complex relationship. Order itself is complex. The aggregation of various institutions, their deep north domains reflect the negotiated outcomes. Mark the card at negotiated outcomes. But interdependence makes war more likely. That's HON 16. Economic interdependence. Enough to ignore that trade promotes peace depends on the balance that between two nations. It's symmetrical, but nations benefit and engage in less conflict more often than not. The relationship may be asymmetrical. The circumstances breed violent conflicts. Interdependent by 25 times more likely to engage in armed conflict than not up to a point. Trade promotes peace. After that point, the balance becomes proportionate to globalization increases. MIT's the next argument about emerging technology. We obviously turn that. You've conceded the piece of 1C evidence that says that growth will only cause extinction. So it says that an emerging tech will only cause extinction if AI is raised in a growth mindset because AI is socialized by the factors around it. But if AI is developed in a non-growth based mindset, it solves the reason why emerging tech would be bad. A collapse entirely solves the rest of their warrants. The argument about 2019 being worse is really bad for them. We'll concede the argument that 2019 is going to be a bigger collapse than ever before. It proves that it would be a global transition that makes the transition way better for our alternative argument. They say loose nukes. There's no evidence for the notion that Pakistan would somehow stop guarding their nuclear facilities if the economy declined. They wouldn't just get rid of their military. Militaries would still exist and nuclear weapons would still be secure. They have no evidence that says any of that's going to happen in the event of a total decline. Cuba proves that nations can secure their national facilities and resources if they have a degrowth-based economy. They say no transition. That is entirely wrong. Growth is the only thing blocking radical movements from getting critical mass. Shock is the only thing that enables buy, and that's the Lorbach evidence. Support is latent now, and proves transition is possible. That's Thomas in 18. Degrowth is already underway. The 100 United States movement, the tiny house movement, voluntary symbolism movement, transition, towns, creative commons, co-housing, and P2P practices. The conferences and academic degrowth have been held since Paris and Barcelona, namely Montreal, Venice, Leipzig, and Budapest. With this kind of growing publicity favor degrowth, we will avoid extinction. Prizes we as a species unite to cause it happen quickly enough. Collapse makes that successful. Alexander 15. Crisis could force all sort of wave of life upon us. Would be the propagation for our politicians to take a radical turn seriously. Crisis can induce a change that the deep green vision can force upon humanity. Crisis could break out the revolution consciousness that opens up space for vision to be embraced and implemented thoroughly. There's intuition less for, but a deep crisis will shake the world awake. That is the only way to create necessary minds. Only deep crisis will create the political will needed for rapid transformation. Cultural changes during the collapse make degrowth desirable. That's Alexander 17. Reduce consumption with the economic framework set up in space for austerity. Austerity is a necessary and agent, even if we return to crisis and opportunities by ways of degrowth. Austerity could liberate society from the materialistic consumption of a good life. That would, if people envision degrowth with clearly a large social movement were asked to bring the degrowth economy into existence, the consuming good argument. This card is not a warrant for absolute decoupling. None of it says that is possible. It says the market instantiated some things, but the Soviet Union going to space proves that communist and degrowth-based economies can also develop innovations, and there's no warrant for this. There's no warrant for this argument that future tech is needed for a growth, or that growth economy is needed for future technology. The sustainability warrants in the card are wrong. There are physical caps on consumable resources. Environmental effects will cut off access to commodities. Their evidence is unwarranted optimism. Growth is unsustainable. One is unpredictable, inevitable checks. That's Lechner et al. 16. The economy is accelerating limits imposed by fundamental physics. We exchange the financial crisis and hopes that high-speed trading make exchanges of middle sectors cause flash crash and no identifiable costs. Spark the crash to take out GBSR's fleet Ebola. The good we don't understand anymore. Interconnectedness urgently requires transition from short-term thinking to sustainable results and triggered by economic incentive. Second is financialization. That's Jackson 19. Abundance of energy no longer available. Declines are inevitable. Automation and no productivity against foreseen have been manifest monetary policy creating fragility markets led to bubbles which culminated in crisis and speculation and reducing making money cheaper. Incentive speculation filling the inequality. There will be neither fiscal nor monetary room for maneuver. There's emerging interest in growth. Tasking is pragmatic and achievable. Third is that resources are finite, physically possible. Extraction doesn't assume declining energy yielded per energy invested, which is the Book's evidence. Ensures collapse by 2050. Callous 18. Absolute decoupling is unlikely. New substance after resource requirements holding when use RT more energy, more land is required. Absolute also competes with food. Rare materials are necessary. Raw materials are necessary. The GDP materials one collapse by 2050. We count imports of water use. Overall savings emissions declining nowhere near 10% required. Further reductions will be harder to sustain. Negative emissions require magical thinking. 4. Warming wrecks GDP. That's Swell's 19. Negative warming reduces growth by 1%. The recession 25 times worse than that could be underestimates. Having new resources, natural disaster, flooding, public health are expensive. Now yields decline, warping trade tracks, granite flights, closure of power plants, negative cognitive bias, and heat demand, damage productivity. The best case would be cut. It would be cut 30% or more twice as deep in the late 30s. The piece of evidence they read of the piece of Bailey evidence was sort of described in cross-ex. It's a very unqualified person with no graduate credentials indicting a person with a graduate degree and not having any warrants for them. This person is paid off and sort of biased to rail against a degrowth economy, but the warrant in the card is renewables. Those merely create other limits. That's Callous 18. It is a fallacy to move from claims about what is logically possible to claims about what is physically possible. Green growth seems impossible for resources and energy in general. Energy use associated with GDP. There are physical limitations to substitutions that physical technology of manufactured products use labor, energy materials to the transformation transformation of the grid, the construction of solar and wind farms might possibly burn substantial quantities of fossil fuels for resource land use, and may also grow infinite growth power. Wind energy would require infinite land, which is impossible in the very long term. More absolute decoupling will be impossible. Their data is cooked. That's Patron. In 18, though, we already consume 500 Eiffel Towers daily. Given these new needs, the demand for metals could double around 2035, crucially given the environmental impact of the ecosystem pollution, the paradox of green energy, clean tech program, the which require metals, which extraction is politically particularly damaging. Renewable tech energies do not function without non-renewable was. Westerners have delocalized production, pretending to be clean, will black materials to industrialize them, technological products, successful transition applies. Rethink our economic models. They say that they say that China's developing AI now. There's Sandoram evidence, and sort of answers their next argument about not having a global internal link. Their Sandoram evidence is about the global economy. Their internal link evidence says that a crisis in 2019 would shock the global economy, which is why all their economic leadership stuff says that everyone's connected to the U.S. and the U.S. is the most important, which also answers their all cause because we would cause a global transition away from AI, which is all of their arguments about why the next crisis is going to be the worst one. Yes, impact to AI. Their evidence was profit-motivated skepticism. That's bomb. In 18, Patrick says the potential for superintelligence to be a focus of risk-profited, politicized skepticism. Superintelligence can be developed by major corporations with a strong financial incentive to avoid regulations. Second, skepticism can be exploited for political purpose. The third is inherently uncertain. Read these factors suggested. Skepticism may be politicized to protect the reputation and funding of the AI field. Err on the side of thinking humans are smarter than you think. That's Defoe 16. SEO repeats the argument that to include predictions are failed to consider potential benefits. This argument is nonsense. Like argument the nuclear engineers who analyze meltdowns are failing to consider cheap electricity. Chernobyl this may be unwise to claim that powerful technology entails no risk. That also may be unwise to claim that powerful tech will never come to fruition. But Rutherford described the impact of extracting energy with atoms. Nothing but moonshine. 24 hours later, Sizzler invented the nuclear reaction.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this distinction between growth mindset and non-growth mindset. Obviously, humans program AI. Whatever biases exist may be programmed by humans. What's the distinction between a growth and a non-growth
Humans
mindset?
initially program AI, but the whole point of artificial intelligence and machine learning is that they are socialized in environments that they're around.
Yeah, so what is the distinction of how growth versus non-growth AI is socialized?
Well, it's a massive one. If an artificial intelligence is socialized in a world that is not based on profit matters more than anything else, that is not developed under the mindset that we have to extract
So
rents
why does
without
AI
consideration
care
of
about
ecological
profit?
limits. Well, the point is that our evidence says that corporations are going to be the biggest developers of AI because they're going to try and develop AI to maximize their rents that they get from their business ventures, and that's going to cause runaway
about
calculation.
humans programming AI. What
Initially,
is the growth distinction between the
humans
growth mindset
initially
and the
program
non-growth?
AI to care about profit motives. AI in a degrowth mindset would not think that way or be programmed that way.
Why?
Why would they care about profit in a degrowth economy?
Why would they not?
Why would it?
Okay,
This is
I
so
guess this begs the
vacuous,
question of
like-
the transition debate. What happens as a result of collapse?
RF says
What
that
cultural changes as per your Alexander evidence?
yeah, the Alexander evidence says that there's no like natural human psychological predisposition towards like ruthless capitalistic growth. Our evidence says that people will transition to more sustainable forms of living that don't depend on globalization, the production of like mass-produced goods. It would cause
This is all just like a top-level explanation of what a transition is. What cultural changes happen to humans as a result of degrowth?
like if you want like the most basic explanation, it's like people stop going to Walmart and start like growing their own food.
Why the fuck would people stop going to Walmart?
Well, it's like there are countries where people don't go to Walmart, like Cuba.
Why
I'm
would
like-
people who have Walmart stop going to Walmart?
Is your argument that like there's some human predisposition? And it's like once you have Walmart, you just can't quit it. It's just like it's so good.
Yeah, Walmart's
Just
pretty
like that
dope,
like
but,
cheap fucking
seriously,
furniture, the like
answer the
$18
question.
bookshelf. It's like no, people can stop going to Walmart. They can like change
Why
their
would
lifestyles.
they? Like,
There is no basis in human psychological studies that say that humans can never stop being capitalist or
okay,
seeking.
what
endless
resources
benefits.
are important for the sustainability debate? What are the finite resource
The
counts?
Bukes and Koch evidence say a bunch of things. It's like soil, the amount of water we have. Broadly, the biggest one is just like energy in the universe. There's a finite amount of it. Yeah, sorry.
We just need to list so we can cut cards.
Soil, water,
Yeah. Soil, water, energy, forests, bees and like pollination, pest control.
Let's talk about some of
There's
the
like warming and
flaws
biodiversity.
of these AI authors. Turchin is a researcher at the Science for Life Extension Foundation.
Yeah.
Draper is a deputy news editor for
With the
Newsweek
Global
Europe.
Catastrophic Risk Institute.
Circovich is qualified. Pueo is probably qualified.
At the point where you're admitting some of the
Daniel
people saying
Evidence
this
is an
shit?
executive director of a research institute that they founded. The Han Evidence is an undergraduate dissertation. Why do you think any of this is bullshit?
Okay, a lot of things. I'm not sure how true all of that is, but the fact that a lot of them do have qualifications proves that like you're probably right.
Qualifications out of like 7.
Okay.
going to be the advantage counterplan, about 1,000 quartz. The food advantage, T restrict.
What are you doing here then?
That's on
Is it
that
on the
page.
thing? Okay.
Yeah, it's on that page.
We use two more.
Sorry, I
No.
didn't hear the end of the order.
Yeah, yeah.
to that.
Sorry, yeah. Advantage counterpoint, food advantage, T restrict, T area.
So T subs,
Like,
tier to nearly all, whatever
Yeah,
the
yeah.
fuck. Yeah. The Robola reports out their bars letter, by the way, to everyone, if anyone's curious and
Good thing.
down.
No wonder you extend politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
D-
totally
Bowler
ruined the transition.
Oh, Matt Jew card. Shout out Michigan.
Yeah, the kids. Oh yeah. There's so many Amazoo cards.
Yeah.
They're awesome. Everyone good? Yep. Okay.
We're not going for any of the planks except the defund ICE and deportation planks. There's no uncertainty. There's no more ICE. It's not a line item. Not a line item in the budget dedicated to deporting people. It obviously solves certainty sufficiently. The permutation links to DNAP because it includes gap, which solves the economy. Conditionality is good. One deck flux F hits the big we need options. Come safe reaction, extension ground 2 and for processing multiple options for us. 2 AC efficiency and best saves, especially when they write a new app. 3 logic between the counterpoint badges between the plan. Good logic always kept scheme making portable skill meaningful. 4 ideological flux on the way to read a counterpoint indicating the same round. 5 skews inevitable T violations. Case defense and it said 6. They should have to defend opportunity cost any other interpretation artificially insulates the app from testing or interpret it. We get what we did. We don't need to solvency advocate your internal link evidence that it's bad to deport people. We fiat that it's key to creativity and non-fly adaptation, especially in a new app scenario. It doesn't link to DDoS. We don't see that many people from deportation. And we don't line also. We no longer line in new ones. We just stop deporting the people who are already here. Certainly means less than the plan, which claims to stop all financial market issues. The food advantage. There's no food impact. Food shortages. Cause skirmishes between farmers with pitchforks, but real armies will not get involved. Regression proves that riots more is more correlated with poverty. And then resource scarcity. That's the pink evidence. There's no correlation. Boo hug at all 15. We find it significant effect for food production that we are unsuccessful in establishing a co-operation pattern between performance and political violence. This would seem to contradict this year's stages of the model without food production reforms that are evidence that food production are associated with unrest and not supported. Cast law evidence is stupid. They're in charge of a food company, which means they're obviously biased. The depth of starvation has to be enormous to trigger a great power war. Chinese peasants have been starving for decades. There's been no war because their central government has repressed them. Same thing with China. Same thing with Russia. They're an authoritarian state. How the hell would they go to war because of starvation? What great power would occur? Why would the United States get drawn in? Obviously, they would have no interest in a Putin diverted. There would be a small-scale diversion like Crimea. Statistics prove their studies are wrong. Diversity between the food right concept is confusion. Peaceful events are not under this term. Many misunderstand your rights from critical data gathering. Not only these work when because use classification, which are not scientifically investigated causal mechanisms between rising food prices and conflict. That empirical foundation. That card is marked at empirical foundation. Topicality restrict. We're not going to go for it. We'll concede their interpretation of restrict. It resolves the contradiction argument between prohibit and nearly all, and it also solves ground, which I will explain more on the other page. The other topicality argument. The topic says nearly all federal administrative agency interpretations applicable plan must structurally restrict the administrative state and not simply change the doctrine on one subset of cases. We have chosen an outrageously generous definition. Almost nobody would use nearly all to mean 60%. Yet they don't even come close to that. Once you violate the topic wording, there's no bright line. They allow a ruling on any subset of agency interpretations that encompasses literally every debate topic: entitlements, labor, environment, business regulation, taxation, civil rights, criminal law, energy, federal procedure, federal lands, and intellectual property. We provide great affirmative ground and focus on the core controversy, which is the separation of powers and the explosion of the administrative state. Remember, restrictions gives them flexibility. They can abolish agency administration, forbid current and future deference, do oversight, consult Congress, many different affirmatives, but they must be about nearly all agency interpretations and treaties, trade, nukes, and surveillance are entire topics of their own. It's an enormous interpretation, even under our, it's an enormous resolution, even under our interpretation, which means that a stride to provide some form of limit. They say they meet, they don't. There are tiny subset of cases. I have no idea how many hybrid statutes there are. Their solvency. A card only gives a couple of examples. HUD's Title 12, the INA and tax collection authority, but that's only 3 laws. How much litigation could there possibly be about those? Agencies released nearly 4,000 interpretations in 2016, nearly 9,000 since 1995. Cruise and 17 agencies issued 3,853 rules in 2016. There have been 88,899 rules since 95, but only 150 end up in court each year. Barnett in 1703 through 13 resulted in 1,558 instances in which the Circuit Court refuted agency statutory interpretation. The name deference cases are used in less than 25% of those. Escrow A, the Supreme Court treatment of agency statutory interpretations, almost 75% of cases not involve name deference regime, but the plan only puts validity before Chevron, even if that encompasses all of Chevron, which it does not. It is only 8% of all cases. Escrow A, contrary to conventional wisdom, Chevron is not the alpha and omega of deference. Jurisprudence of the 1014 case included our study. Chevron was cited in only 128.3% of the population. Chevron is but one of an array. The court has said a majority of its agency interpretation cases applies no deference regime at all. The no deference case would amount to more than 70% of the 1014 cases in our data said that you got to count all the courts, not just the Supreme Court. Why Amendment 16 amendments challenge the federal court for ruling deference to agency. Chevron has been a central to the Supreme Court court and lower court, the bill would eliminate a judicial reference requiring a court whether district appeals to make an initial determination without regard to any interpretations of statute. A substantial definition, we didn't define substantial. Your restriction can be considerable. It just has to apply to nearly all difference in the area. In the area definition, their evidence defines two different phrases. Sources a legal document that defines the phrase as a whole. The power in the area means no exceptions. That's Webster 5. The use the pronoun, use the reference that the group as a whole. Even if what in the area means it's ambiguous, we should use the definition that avoids absurd results. That's Saunders state the determination of what a partisan intent of the phrase in the area is a seminal issue in the area is not defined by the agreement that a contract refers to in the area is silent to what the area entails. Just because we're given no guidance, we should look at LA Civic Code 2045 to determine if there's a clear and explicit meaning. It does not include absurd consequences, but the resolution is in one or more of the following areas. The floor of one is indivisible. Jacobo, it's a 99. One is indivisible in quantity or in kind. It's not contradictory with the other thing. It's nearly all, which defines the boundaries of the area. And then in the area means that you have to be all of and nearly all of a deference, which means that you have to be all of nearly all of deference. That proves that nearly all is the outer bounds. But in the area means that you have to fill all of that nearly all. Their interpretation, any other interpretation, obviously leads to a limits explosion. They conceded that results in a substantive explosion of affirmatives, not just in the deference area, which I kind of did in the overview, but also footnotes, tons of different affirmatives. And footnotes, tons of different affirmatives. If in the area can mean anything in the area, you could have the Cal Berkeley Cuban Cobalt F. You could have a number of statutory allegations. You could have the democracy assistance topic, which is an entire topic, any number of surveillance cases. The surveillance topic in high school was a nightmare. If the affirmative could restrict any of those, it would obviously be terrible to nearly all counter-interpretation. There might not be a precise numerical cutoff for nearly all, but the evidence they read cites the same 60% statistic as our card. This is the most generous interpretation that we could find, and obviously any other interpretation of nearly all is worse, but if you prefer not having a cutoff, Cooper 6 nearly all is used to describe 100% minus 1 or 2. What's the notable exception, if anything? If it's anything of note, that renders nearly all meaningless, and least all of our offense. I established the plan is 8% at most on the we meet argument. Exception intuitively implies that there's a rule, but if 8% are one way, 92% are another, clearly the 8% would be the exception, not the other way around. So this card that clearly implies at least 50%, which they also don't mean. It's not arbitrary, and win rates is a good standard because the active
It's not win rates at all. It's the amount of times the case is cited.
It's not win rates at all. It's the number of times the case is cited, which means that which is the active reference, and the active deferring is where executive power comes from. That's their own evidence on the other topicality page. It doesn't mix burdens. It's the only way to assess what nearly all deference is. What's up?
Just say debatability outweighs arbitrariness and answer reasonability.
Okay, debatability is more important than arbitrariness. On the biggest NDT in history, even if we're being being pedantic is less important than having a quite high quality of debate, since clashes the root cause of all debates value we're so reasonable. We pick the lowest 4 possible competing interpretations of the best way to evaluate this debate. It's the least arbitrary reasonability cause judgment bench, which takes the debating out of the debater's hand. It's in most real world. There's only one interpretation that is actually correct of any legal statute, and debates competing interpretations is key to find the best definition.
We have 750.
It's not a dollar. It makes sense.
at 5. Oh, nice. Can you sum that up, Cultural?
Yep.
Wouldn't it? Am I wrong?
No, it's definitely not.
Does my voice project enough from here for you all?
Yep.
That's fine.
It doesn't.
I too am just going to read cards on native.
Drop T.
Yeah. Who needs it? Make the 24 dream happen. Wait, I had spray in my hand, so can one of you?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, I just can't grip with this hand
Of
anymore.
course.
GSU. Yeah.
Oh,
Just short. I'm very short.
Oh,
I just can't
I
undo
got
what
you.
you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. They're not tight, but that's fine.
The tightening I can do is the untightening I can't do. because I can't grip.
We have 5. I'm just gonna write something down. I use 10 more seconds. 450.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, I ruined it.
He's just gonna be the same as us. I like how you came in with the door the farthest away.
Yeah, I thought the water fountain would be over there, but it's
They took 10 more seconds and dropped out. Alright, is everyone good for an order?
So I need more. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. The immigration advantage, the advantage counterclaim, the USMCA, the T, the DDA debate. Just write down.
immigration advantage counterclaim, politics, TV.
Alright. Everyone good to go?
And collapse causing extinction or casual evidence indicates that it destroys the ability to export food to places like the Middle East where the U.S. and Russia are bumping up. That ensures escalation because those crises ensure that U.S. and Russia both have the military intervene. It also causes escalation in places like Central Africa where the U.S. and China are vying over spheres of influence right now, and plans able to solve all their defenses to U.S. exports, which are also undermined by the inability for farmers to have laborers to effectively use to effectively grow food. It's able to solve all their analysis is simply wrong and assumes that the U.S. is able to solve all their cities. Examples don't make sense because it's about the U.S. being able to export food and defeats of spheres of influence that explain about the advantage China plan doesn't solve any of the advantages of the DOD, USCIS, and BIA all can still use secret process to ensure deportations and arbitrary rules that disallow immigrants from coming to the United States, which deters laborers, which able to solve permutation to both shields linked to any of their office. The USMCA DSN, the all causes don't take it out. It's about the question of the USMCA not being able to overcome things like lack of laborers. Only obviously the plan is able to solve the T subset arguments. View this debate through the lens of reasonability. Their interpretation destroys predictability because it artificially skews the difference literature based in a way that either has to depend on win rates, which makes it pertinent and doesn't align with reality, or it only makes non-delegation topical, which doesn't comport with literature surrounding the judicial restriction on judicial deference. Actually means it's the NDT, which means their interpretation can prevent asks from being written, but it does skew teams who have already written asks about changing deference routines because it's what the lit says is topical. That says a precedent discouraging innovation research. That's ultimately the core of education value achieved by debate. The over limiting I'll do it here. They make the topic too small. Only 5 overly broad asks that lose the picks and can't generate salty deficit. ESR innovation and flexibility should weight all their offense because 2019 means asks can't win theory against cheating. Counterbalance and ESR can be written to artificially feed out all of their internal thing. If they get to say they kick interrupts in the 2 and are not proves their interrupt is arbitrary, it makes it impossible for the 2 to coherently answer any of their offense Chevron deference, which proves that we radically change how the deference regimes work. That is able to solve. It proves that there's no limit argument, because if they don't get rid of the restriction prohibit arguments, people will just read a whole host of different mechanisms and actors that they give examples of, which proves all of their limits. Offense is inevitable, but our arbitrariness offense is an inevitable group. All other numbers arguments, the hybrid statutes arguments, are evidence indicates how the SEC, IRS, and a whole host of different agencies, including all immigration courts, etc., use hybrid statutes to get Chevron deference to ignore and promulgating effective regulations. All of those agencies have thousands and thousands of statutes to prove that we apply to all of them. All their number arguments is a res issue, not a plan issue. The resolution says that you only have to restrict all or nearly all deference, which means change deference regimes as per their own escrow and RASO evidence read. And the one I see was able to solve no. Find off cut off, it is unpredictable for nearly all Terry 98. The losses nearly all districts, 40% and 60% districts, and I find nearly all over. So there's a lot of confusion, but it generated reserves and notable are actually within the 2AC. The is a function of word that signifies a particular noun, Merriam-Webster, no data function word as indicated noun has been specified, or is a particular member in the area means close to Merriam-Webster, no data close to somewhere in the area, contextually is part of something, a Google dictionary, no date of a region or a part of. Their sounders evidence about Louisiana law and saltwater, but our negative term has more absurd consequences. Sounder and the majority leads to an absurd consequence of some word to be injected into the law in the areas ambiguous. I would reverse the trial course ruling. The of is a function word explains the cause of reference. Those can be subsets. Merriam-Webster, no data function word used to indicate origin or cause that answers a lot of all of their offense. The finance advantage impact overview. The plan solves warning better. To see evidence indicates is key to the incentivized profit motive to create incentive to buy and develop renewable energy, as well as carbon negative emission energy, which our technology, which they have conceded, which answers all the reasons why renewable fails. There's no, we solve the impact to all these evidence, because it doesn't. The reason why there's a low cognitive bias for economic decline is because of automation. Our evidence says it won't come online enough time to solve the economy degrowth, can't reduce emissions enough to solve the environment policy. We take conservative subject IPCC. We have to reduce emission 40% within 20 years. Can't simply get close to the goal. Reducing GDP degrowth is not a solution. Climate stabilization. What you have to do is massively invest in clean tech. That's the only way of you even promoting degrowth is not simply a solution. Only markets can solve. Bill 315. The cost of facing climate change are local. The benefits of long-term and global equity issues are threatening. Meanwhile, carbon dioxide being emitted at unprecedented rates. So time is running short. The problems are fast, but not insurmountable. Technology innovation is tried. Germany business model innovation all requires strong business leadership while regular markets role. Drive climate solutions. The price store module drop by 150 times to rapidly drive the uptake of business model innovation is needed. Market needed. AI is far off and will cause a teacher. Our guys' evidence indicates that all other studies are simply bunked because they've conceded we're a regulation good after we increase the ability of promulgation of effective regulations of emerging technology. As per the finance advantage, we solve these reasons why AI would be bad in the first place. But our guys' evidence indicates that at the very worst, humans are smart enough not to make them kill us all. AI is far off and will cause a teacher. Brooks in 15, it's very easy for people to think you're not deep in the technology. It's not to be a generalization. We've seen Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking all say AI is going to take off over the world. The thing is, they sure none of them work in technological field. People generate in ways that if a person can do some tasks, they can do adjacent tasks. None of these are chess programs and play tic-tac-toe. We have a significant advance. We're still a long way to go to understand everything shades have been at least 30 years. We're not going to be existential time. Significant time for we need to worry about. There are the 20 fundamental challenges Dirk Splitter has been working on. We're making real progress on one of those challenges. There's no aliens impact. They don't exist. Reddit 18 alien like-minded widespread bioscientists have not yet the Drake equation requiring that estimation on searching for more accurate action, including searching the new research less wise. We are only intelligent life in the Milky Way. Humanity's only detectable intelligible life. The growth solves for arguments. Our evidence is much better. Indicates we are able to solve things like counterbalancing because degrowth makes nationalist ambitions more likely to lash out democracy. Impact. DT Pence doesn't take this out because it's a question about U.S. power projections. The emerging technology arguments, regulation, self-identified proofs we're able to solve emerging technology from being bad. The loose nuke stuff, our evidence indicates it's not about Pakistan. It's what U.S. regulation ability to kind of regulate physical material preventing from getting into the hand of the state, which requires the admin state and growth. Only we're able to solve the transition, the transition debate, which movements are able to lead the transition. They're about P2P, like 4chan movements, not anything that can overcome a lead. Claim there's no mindset shift. Hybrid and 50 is hard to convince people voluntarily reduce, construct all organs and maximize their rate of energy. Their principle remains evolving. We're trying to be high return, responding to immediate threats, system house random rush, small percentage may change behavior. The rate majority is less likely, market less likely. Our evidence indicates that sustainability is a thing. It's much better. All of their examples of things that are beyond people are pike. Evidence indicates we overcome it because we make technology more efficient. Long-term trends, direct decoupling, and solve the impact work. And all thinking humanity has flourished. Our violence is lowers every limit to growth. Are so theoretical. We myth management humans are no risk of blocking. And convert with us can cause catastrophic impact. Transfer driving decoupling. Market decoupling.
450.
Yeah.
What?
I know, I'm just
the economy advantage, so DDEF, then advantage counterplan, then advantage 2.
That's all good.
Okay. I might read one card that Truth has. Did you send it?
Yep.
Okay.
This one as well. Yep.
Are we all good to go? Great.
Growth causes extinction from ecological overshoot. We have the only extinction impact. At no point is a card been read that says that nuclear winter would cause extinction or any of the affirmative scenarios, but our evidence says that to continued decline of the environment and continued exploitation and warming would make the Earth uninhabitable. Let's try or die for reducing consumption, otherwise finite limits to growth will cause extinction. That's the one. It's the evidence. And the two, it's the evidence that says that there is a cognitive bias based on a naturalistic fallacy for you to presume that growth is good and that we can continue sustaining it. The magnitude argument matters way more than anything else. Future generations being that you should only prioritize 100% extinction risk over 99% extinction risk because they have no evidence that any of their scenarios are truly existential. The first argument about the planet solving warming because of carbon negative technologies. We read a bunch of renewables indices that none of their evidence answered. The renewables thing was speculative. The carbon capture and storage evidence is also speculative. It's based on a person who didn't have any qualifications. That was the Bailey evidence. None of their evidence says that any countries are developing that technology now. They've also dropped a bunch of sustainability arguments that are going to make it impossible, which will be later. The carbon capture and storage is ineffective. They conceded our argument about renewables causing massive mining of new rare earth minerals and neodymium, which means that we would have to destroy and exploit other environments which accelerates the decline of biodiversity, which turns all the rest of their impacts, and the argument that there are physical limits to growth, so it is not just warming, but rather a broader biodiversity and ecological sustainability argument. And our evidence says that since there are physical limits to energy because of the laws of physics, you cannot continue developing and extracting metals without causing negative feedbacks on the environment. They say they solved the cognitive bias because of automation. I have no idea what that argument is. It was a new argument that Tweezy didn't say the word automation, so I don't know why I should have to answer with the argument that they wouldn't be able to solve fast enough. Their card is an economics professor writing on nakedcapitalism.com. They've dropped the impact. There's no impact events to warming, so every increment matters. Emissions have gone too far as a red herring. Even if subwarming is locked in, every increment reduced has an infinite impact due to threshold uncertainty. So try or die negative. Other constraints that degrowth does solve are distinct impacts, and negative emissions tech doesn't solve. That's Wallace 19. That's because these numbers are small. We tend to trivialize the differences between them. Human experience and memories are often no good analogy for how we should think of those threshold T waves will kill thousands every summer. At this, the rescue set 3 degrees permanent drought, but wildfire, same fever, and food crisis. These parts are irreversible and effectively permitted. There are far too many uncertainties in our models to take all of their predictions as gospel. Running these models many times, so avoid the 12% chance we overshoot at 88 degrees. Humans may not be able to move around without dying. Too many of us have developed misleading impression that some picture binary warming is not yes or no. Today is not weather. Today's weather forever. Doomsday no is a function that gets worse over time. So as long as we continue to produce GHGs, their effects will grow and build. Unless we choose to halt it, it will never stop. They got to the transition debate with not enough time, which means that if we when the transition is effective, we would be able to solve it fast enough. They say that only markets are effective. They dropped all of the sustainability warrants, which totally tube the rest of their strategy, because if we win that it is not sustainable, whether or not we have a big internal link to the impact is irrelevant. One is inevitable shocks. The Keckner evidence says the laws of physics are going to cause inevitable shocks to the economy that make it impossible to continue going at the current rate. Second is financialization. 0 words said about it in the 1 AR. The Jackson evidence says that inevitable asset speculation and bubbles that are coming will pop the economy inevitably and cause a worse crisis once it is too late. That answers all of their arguments about market solving anything, because financialization is going to blow up the economy in a violent way that makes it impossible to solve our impacts. Third is finite resources. The Callus evidence says that there is simply not enough energy in the universe to be able to solve in time and allow markets to do it. Fourth is that the warming turns GDP. The Wallace evidence says it's going to collapse economic growth and make it impossible for any of their shit to be realized. We're not going to go over the AI stuff, so and the next 4 arguments are irrelevant, so because we're not going for that impact. The growth solves war argument. They've dropped the Han evidence that says that interdependence makes the likelihood of a crisis initiation 25 times more likely because of unbalanced trade dependencies. The Davis and Pelk evidence, which is also never again responded to, says that leaders will turn inward in a time of cooperation because they have a structural incentive to protect what resources they do have. Our democracy defense does answer their liberal order impact that says that the globe is shifting to regionalism. America is becoming less relevant as an international actor, and in the event of America's decline, other countries would simply turn towards regional blocks of cooperation. Cuba proves that you don't need to be globally connected to the system of trade in order to have a sustainable civilization. The Regs emerging tech argument is relevant because we're not going for that. The loose nukes argument is obviously silly. They have no scenario other than Pakistan for why terrorists would be able to get nuclear weapons. No evidence that says that any groups want to do that. No time frame for their impact, and no evidence that says that militaries are simply going to stop guarding nuclear facilities, which are super impenetrable. They say which movements are going to solve anything. The transition debate is mostly off by the 1 AR. Our evidence is incredible. The Lorbach evidence says there's latent capacity now for a transition because it's reaching critical mass, but only a shock can inspire that. The system, the Thomas evidence does give examples. The 100 Resilient Cities movement, the Tiny House movement, the Voluntary Simplicity movement, the Transition Towns movement, and Creative Commons all provide latent capability, which can only be inspired by a shock. The Alexander evidence says that collapse causes and a crisis changes the game and sort of breaks the growth stalemate that causes a new shift in human consciousness. The second piece of Alexander evidence says it causes a cultural shift towards austerity, which answers their argument about the decoupling argument. That was also the rest of the sustainability debate. The decoupling card, they didn't get to the warrants in this card. This card just says that it is possible to continue developing technology within the market. They dropped the Soviet Union example from the 2 and see that the Soviet Union got to space even though they didn't have a capitalist economy, which means that some tech advances are going to be inevitable under a degrowth economy. And since they're dropping the fucking warming and biology impacts that has to outweigh, we're not going to go for the immigration. We're not going to go for the immigration advantage, counterpoint, and CETA permutations. No impacts any of this stuff. And no theory arguments. Advantage 2. There's no risk of a food war. 1 is the Pinker evidence that is a regression analysis that cites data from Africa between 1990 and 2010, and which is, by the way, the countries, the group of countries that their evidence was talking about. It says that food crises do not cause leaders to divert or inspire a relative increase in the incidence of conflict. Second is the piece of evidence that truth rate in the 1 AR. There's no correlation between food price spikes and escalation. At worst, there's a couple farmers with pitchforks riding in the streets, but none of that gets to nuclear conflict. Truth laid out a very specific question in the 1 AR, which is like, what is the scenario for escalation if Russia and China, which are authoritarian countries, can merely crack down on their lower classes in the event of a food crisis? Who is going to go nuclear? What is the scenario for nuclear war? They've dropped the indict of Castlaw throughout the debate. Castlaw is a dude who was like in the Marines and is now a owner of a food biotechnology company. Fucking obviously he thinks that food price insecurity is going to cause wars because he's a neocon and runs a company that is based on the export of food technology. So they have no real credible evidence that answers our political science studies that are longitudinal and say that over time and over long periods of evaluation, there's no connection between food prices and the incidence of conflict.
All costs.
They said the argument on the USMCA to say that there are all causes to agriculture. It is not just about labor. You can read the card that they read. It says that the ag industry is tubed because they've lost $10 million, which means they can't solve this advantage.
That was because of tariffs.
It's because of tariffs.
Yeah.
They don't solve that, right?
Advantage 2, advantage 1.
Everyone good?
I'm not sure about you, but I didn't catch an external impact in the 2 hour. If we win the wavelength turn all of their warming stuff, it makes it impossible for them to win. The debate, the food stuff, it might not cause extinction or a massive war between the US and Russia, but it's an external impact that DNF can't solve. It has a pretty big impact. Innovation is key to high yield agriculture. They've conceded all of our internal links to the Castle evidence that says that digitalization is key to effective precision farming, increasing things like yields and crop predictions, which is the stuff thing on the sustainability debate that they just didn't come to grips with. All are impossible without growth because there's no big farms that have the capital to buy those things or invest in things like digitalization in agriculture, which means there's no ability to feed people which means there's no ability to feed people absent growth. Even if we don't win our internal links, there's no way they can solve this. How the fuck does DNF fail to feed 7 million people? You can't just have cooperative farms that are able to distribute food all the time. At the very least, proof those are crunched is head to the transition, because even if that's not extinction or a food war, it impacts hundreds of billions of people that die, and it's faster than their impact because ag collapse is likely in the status quo due to a lack of workers in U.S. agriculture. That only the F solves by incentivizing more workers to come to the United States, which at the very least solve the agriculture industry and food exports in the U.S., which is an external impact that you can hang your hat on because it has an impact to people who are starving in the U.S. They conceded that they read some famine impacts for us in the block at some point, which we didn't read impacts defense to. The biosphere collapse stuff doesn't deter any of the food and stuff. It's a question of sequencing. We have effective food supplies in the status quo. It takes decades for warming to destroy all collapse, but collapsing growth now guarantees the instant food wars, which is the Castle evidence, which is the internal link I did above all of their external stuff. It usually makes you ask the question of how does DNF solve any of this. Their indicts of Castle are pretty much new in the 1.8.1 and the 2NR because they didn't have an impact to them in the block, which means I get to explain what Castle is, citing statistics from other kind of like governmental bodies and longitudinal analysis of history. Only all of their analysis assumes that the U.S. is able to fill into that into the status quo, which fundamentally doesn't happen if the U.S. doesn't have a manufacturer work labor base for things like agriculture, because it's the basis of like 20% of exports to the developing world, which means that there's a massive crunch to set to the transition. Tariffs aren't enough cause our internal link outweigh because it causes hundreds of thousands of deportations to the literal basis of our ag industry, which means even if tariffs hurt the economy, there's still a massive risk of this stuff. The advantage 1 there, warming. The warming stuff should be sufficient for us to win this debate. Dan at the top, Dan asserts that Caitlin dropped a lot of shit. What is embedded clash? I don't think he knows what conceded mean. This is just posturing. We've read tons of really good cards and they haven't really answered all our what I see, especially on this in the context of the sustainability debate about financialization, which I'll talk about in a second. But you shouldn't just like strike any of these arguments because they weren't in the 1AR. Only the market has the scope and scale to drive solutions to warming. They've conceded pretty good evidence that says that pushes consumer behavior in a certain direction based on consent, which the Poland and the Guthrie evidence. The 2NR doesn't tell you how those incentive structures exist post-transition, which is something that they agree is necessary to solve like kind of the uptake of those things. How do you get people in a subsistence no Walmart economy to invest in mitigation technology, things like negative emission technology? Degrowth is too slow. There's tons of carbon dioxide in the air. The status quo, the IPCC says that we need 40% reduction within 20 years. Only the market can solve that because things like negative energy technology and solar price energies are dropping in. The status quo uptake is only possible driven by the increase of cost of things like fossil resources in the status quo, which flips try or die because degrowth is just simply not a solution to doing any of that kind of stuff. The Guthrie evidence indicates that only business model innovation can solve the elite claim arguments, which I'm pretty sure is conceded sustainability transition argument coming out of the 2NR because it only gets elite to buy in because by framing those things within the context of profit motive, there might not be a psychological cling to growth, but people definitely like their Lexuses and Walmarts and won't be willing to give it all just as a result of like the economy taking a hit. The Pika evidence indicates that there's new sectors of technologies always emerging and transforming existing sectors, fundamentally change all of their sustainability warrants, can grow crops on less land, use energy less, and create less emissions and generating electricity. Things like precision agriculture, the cognitive bias arguments at the 2NR goes to the top of the at the top take out all of their sustainability arguments because of proof that humans have a cognitive bias towards things like capitalism, which means that there will always be kind of an elite claim, which means there's no risk of transition. It says that automation, there's no cognitive bias going the other way because it says that automation fills in, but that automation doesn't happen fast enough to solve our economic collapse stuff, which does have a big terminal impact. And they've conceded the scope and scale of our internal links, which also have their sustainability arguments. There are no renewables tech argument and the like REM's argument, the Pika evidence they've conceded says that we have tons of resources that exist in the status quo, things like thousands of years of phosphorus resources. There's no impact to any of like the aluminum or lithium stuff or like terminal impact to renewable. There are no terminal impact to REMs, which means that you can't vote on the CCS ineffective is a new argument in the 2NR. You should strike from your flow. They have no evidence on this question. It's just a Dan assertion. There's no impact to any of this stuff in new and negative emission technology, which is only driven by the uptake of things like carbon, which is only driven by the uptake of things like capitalism. Gravity solves the residual impact to any kind kind of pollution that CCS has, the physical limits to energy stuff. What the fuck is this? There's no limits to growth. It doesn't assume any kind of technology that exists in the status quo, which the Burke and the Pike evidence all indicate can transform the ways that sectors exist in the status quo to make them much more, much less energy intensive. We've read two qualified cards that we've read two qualified cards that I'm pretty sure are for professors of university that are citing statistics about the way that the IPCC cites things on wall as well as evidence flipped. If you want to talk about quals, this person is a deputy editor at New York Magazine. You shouldn't believe anything they says that there's not offense because at the point where we're straight terming warming, they haven't conceded any of our structured argument. The transition debate, I did the laws of physics stuff above, which answers their financial shocks argument because there's no risk of this like kind of energy stuff coalescing into collapse of the economy. The financialization stuff, they conceded the 1EC internal links financialization is our internal link. The SEC and the FTC tax overreach causes massive financial shocks and bubbles in the status quo that only the plan solves by reducing overreach and their ability to like kind of insulate their own decisions from oversight, which only the plan solves. The resources in the warming turn GDP argument, the Brooke evidence that we got to the warrant in the 1AR says that there's massive decoupling going on in the status quo because of the development of technologies. We linked turn the reason why warming would turn GDP in the status quo anyway. The Peck evidence is not unqualified and is just much better than they're giving it credit for. The growth doesn't. Growth solves where they have not. The regionalism stuff and all of the like turning inward stuff doesn't solve any of our specific internal links. It's too generic. It doesn't. Our internal link, as explicitly articulated since the 2EC, is that other countries in the world of us weak U.S. counterbalancing as the U.S., Russia, and China are developing things like hypersonic technology and pushing towards intervention in things like the SES. Only a strong U.S. show force is key to deter those rising challenges.
What? It's not interdependence good.
It's not the argument that interdependence good, but that U.S. economic strength is key to deter rising challenges. They conceded the emerging tech impact, which means that only economic strength can solve. They can create like the incentive to create collective act, and probably that solve extinction from emerging tech, which is something that they read an impact to. That's not just about AI, the loose nuke stuff. I'm not going for it. The transition debate, they haven't answered any of our elite clean arguments, which I extended to the top there. Tiny has examples about like things like 4chan, P2P sharing, which is like hacking things like Bitcoin, which means either those technologies are inevitably developed in the status quo or require the market for uptake.
do some of the
The card doc. Yeah. Marks are returns, by the way.
also read all of them.
also broke the rules on NDT. There's a step 2. Option 11.
just use yours. Your plug.
Oh.
people. It's just
Oh, okay,
I'm
okay.
seeing a combination of like Shadow Tag.
But that'll be
or kiddos.
they're gonna have to spin it, try to get the underlying stuff, and
What is it?
well, no, just the Justice Department doesn't want to release it because it would make
Yeah, but the DOJ gets to decide.
they'll say all the grand jury material is secret. That if people, because there's a bunch of things in there about why they didn't charge like solid litigation.
Yeah, I figured all the lists be censored if we see it.
But there could be one where even if the public is like seeing it told, the intelligence community or Congress can
If Congress says that it's out.
it'll leak in.
This is like the most coherent thing I've also ever heard on like right or say.
He's a smart guy.
He's a
Even
very
if you
smart
don't
guy.
like
It's just
him,
like he's very bad at like in like interviews like that. Or like when
well, he comes to me. He comes across as very. He knows everything.
like that question in front of the house, which is like
It reminds me of Vader, actually.
Yeah.
Kind of. I
it's
know.
like dude calmed down.
I'm
Not
smarter than you. Just let me handle it.
just came to fight.
decision. Congrats, everyone. Good debate. The decision is a 3-0 for the negative from Kentucky.
So, I think the short of it is like impact calc, honestly. I think for me, impact calc and some evidentiary things. So, starting off, I think the extinction outweighs stuff is really where I started the debate, just kind of assessing, what impact should I assess and evaluate. And I think like with any like DDEV, like war versus the environment stuff, just thinking of a comparison of like what do I assess first. The 2R just kind of wins by concession that, the assertion without any evidence that like nuclear war doesn't cause extinction, we should only assess extinction level impacts. And I think there really just needs to be some, time frame comparison of like what's the interaction between the war and environment stuff that y'all have going on for like assessing any of the food wars or the economy war impact.
What's the question about that? Why not the like 30, 20, 30 seconds at the top of the food stuff of the 2AR that is doing time frame impact comparison? I'm just curious if you had that.
Yeah, like what I have just on the food stuff at least. Let me pull it up.
It's like a short-term crunch DA, I think is what he said.
Yeah, like a short-term crunch DA, but it's like I think what I would say is like I don't think y'all have any there's just not really like any like assessment between like billions of people will die, and it sounds callous, but like the 2R says explicitly like only assess extinction impacts. Who cares about anything else? Nuclear war doesn't cause extinction, and I think y'all have to have some kind of like response to that.
Why are those two the same thing? Like, billions of nuclear war doesn't cause extinction, and billion does not mean that you don't care about it.
Totally, and I think y'all mind if let me get through this, y'all, and I'll answer Yeah. So I think there's not really like a frame to assess like large scale violence, like tons of people dying and tons of different stuff. Between like the offense y'all are going for. At least I think that's where I start the assessment of just like AF impacts versus environment level stuff. So I think right off the bat, of just like what should I prioritize, I think the neg has kind of the only comparative impact frame or like definitive impact statements. There's not like a don't privilege extinction type thing going on. And I think after that, I'll kind of get through some of the defense on like the econ and food stuff. I do think they win sufficient defense, but I don't think the AF is in a bad spot. And my frustration is, before like reading the evidence, I really thought I was gonna vote on like no, like we're past the tipping point. Only CCS can solve warming. With that in mind, I don't think there's any great comparison between like warming versus other environment impacts in the debate. And I really found myself not wanting to reconstruct a lot of the debate. And reading a bunch of evidence, but ended up having to do a little bit of that. And I put a lot of this responsibility in the negative because y'all like have so much vertical prolif of like the same cards that give the same damn warrant, and even the things that are mentioned in cross-sex like aren't super well explained or encapsulated. The impact that I think the neg is most ahead on is just their warming stuff. And I think for all of y'all's like solid explanation and I think the strategy of this argument, I don't think there's like a card in the debate that says CCS will come online, it's feasible, it can reverse emissions, and I kind of looked closely at your evidence. I could talk through some evaluation of that, but I think explanation-wise, y'all are in a good spot. I don't think there's any card that actually substantiates carbon capture being able to reverse emissions.
So we never said CCS, we said negative emissions technology. The PICA evidence is about like precision ag being a carbon sink. I don't know why this.
They were the ones who asserted it was CCS. We never asserted that.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Do you want to?
Well,
Yeah. I'm just kind of like control Fing reading your cards. It's like I tried to do the most generous possible reading of y'all's evidence on this and like really scrutinize. If there are lines that substantiate that, I'm having trouble connecting it. Maybe we can kind of go through it a little bit more depth if y'all want. But I do think the neg has some evidence in the 2R that's like it's definitely not a yes/no threshold. It's somewhat of a sliding scale. We haven't really put ourselves on the precipice of the worst possible effects, and it's still possible for us to limit emissions. And I think in terms of, without finding like a carbon sink or CCS warrant, I'm just kind of left with renewables, which I think the neg is definitely ahead on generally, like questions of RIM, rare earth metals not being able to solve. So I think for the sustainability stuff, this is also a place that is very frustrating because I think if the neg is ahead on the warming stuff, extinction is certainty from warming. There's not really like any impact even from either side or from the AF. So taking the risk of a transition, so I'm kind of willing to like take the risk of a transition to despite all of the like slow burn, tons of people dying in order to preserve total human survival, given that's the impact frame that they have. And I think warming turns all the sustainability stuff. There's not like a good response to that, or there's not any good defense to how that implicates your other stuff. I thought the negs warrant debating sustainability stuff is very, very vague. And by the end of the debate, I think outside of the warming debate specifically, the AF is actually doing a pretty decent job of describing some like near-term technologies that could come online. I think y'all just need to give your evidence credit and go through the motions and like actually explain some of the external impacts to warming that y'all want us to evaluate. In terms of the financialization stuff, I agree largely with the 2AR. I was really sympathetic to this, like, you get to explain your internal link, especially since it's linked to all of your offense. The 1AC said they stopped those bubbles, that's what you've conceded, etc. I didn't think that was too complicated. For the economy stuff, both the economy and food stuff, like I mentioned, I think there is an adequate, decent amount of defense. I thought by the end, this impact was a little bit, the econ impact was a little bit difficult to assess for the AF, just because, once again, I think y'all are doing this like good extensions of that stuff and decent explanation of that, but there's not like any comparative assessment for just like overwhelming magnitude comes before everything else. So I can kind of like talk through some of the defense and details of that, but I think the neg has some stuff in play. I thought their stuff generally applied. Food stuff, I don't think the short-term shock, the like gotcha stuff of the USMCA really applies. I think the AF is doing adequate explanation of it's a short-term blip and not really the scope of y'all's internal link. But I do think the quality of their defense is much, much better. I was pretty compelled by like the data, empirical examples stuff. So I think really the winning AF path for me would just be a little bit more different, a little bit more crisp and detailed impact calculus. Like, I'm with you that I'm not on the I don't think they have any evidence for like nuclear war doesn't cause extinction, or like nuclear war doesn't have effects on the environment. I would just be willing for you to kind of just say like, this is obviously BS, who cares? Or just like say exactly what you were kind of asking me just now. I'm like, yeah, like it doesn't cause extinction, but are you really going to take a dice roll on billions of people?
It doesn't cause extinction or wars, but it causes. Do you want me to read it? Like,
Yeah, that's kind of what I got. You can go ahead, Maggie.
Yeah, it's fine. Like, I don't want to, like, it's just
You've been such a jerk to us. I started the debate. I made sort of a different decision. I didn't really start with the impact calculus because I think you'll have potential inroads to this. Where I started my decision was the sustainability debate and whether or not the system is just like sustainability debate, because that begs the question of whether or not we can solve warming and whether or not you can solve warming. I think that and that I decide negative on the sustainability question because I don't understand the mechanism for resolving these financial bubbles and these issues that are coming up. It's not discussed, and I think that the uniqueness and the way that they're explaining of the inevitable collapse makes it very persuasive. I spent some time thinking about this question of whether or not it's too late to resolve warming, because that would be important in understanding whether or not I would endorse like a carbon reduction strategy or not. I don't think that you have answers to this argument that your technology accelerates warming, makes it worse, makes it the tipping points come even faster. I don't think that the card read in the 2NR is the best one to read as an answer to the claim that they're making about IPCC, about the models. And but I do think that it works with this acceleration of warming. I think that also a problem that I have when I'm thinking about this evidence is like there's no warrant or explanation of why it's too late. It's just this guy who's like, people say this, but it's not too late. Or it is too late, we're never going to be able to do this. And I don't know why that's true, so I have a hard time asserting that that would sort of over-inform my understanding of that. So I think that there is a large risk of, I do not think that the current system is sustainable. I think that it's try or die for warming. The way that I resolve the like defense on the case. I don't think that there's a good answer by the affirmative about this turning inward and cooperative element of defense that they have. And so that's really problematic because I don't think that there's a transition problem. Regarding the crunch debate, I thought about that. I think I have two problems. One is that impact framing of warming, if it's, you know, that filters it. But two, like, it feels new in the 2AR based on the 1AR. I think you've got this argument kind of about exports. And then so like I went back to, like you've got this argument and it's like we need to like get it around the world. And then I don't think the 1AC argument or cards about this are like particularly good. It's just like we need lots of workers. And then so that kind of really influences how much weight I feel like I can give this crunch disad that's just like we need people working in the southern part of America. And so I think that there's a low risk of a disad to transitioning, and that it is better. It is the better hope for solving or resolving warming than the AF offers. And so that's kind of what I resolved.
Can I ask a quick question
Sure.
about the financialization thing?
Mm-hmm.
Mostly just because I think it was my fault for not being crisp in the way I are with this. So our internal links are definitively about like bubbles, insider tradings, whatever, like the SEC and IRS stuff. I explained that stuff on the counter plan, and then on the DIA debate, I was like, we are a regulation good ask, and like obviously that's not obvious, like crisp, like that answer financialization explicitly in a 1AR, but like, why is that? Like I know, like maybe, like obviously I need to explain more, but like.
So for me, my problem with the AF understanding that I have is that I understand the uniqueness trigger for the link, but I don't understand why the AF resolves the the solvency question is not, I'm not sure what it is, and so that's kind of my problem. I took a really long time because I thought a lot about how to resolve this like too late question, and also like what is the solvency mechanism for resolving climate change, and does the AF have one, and like investment in technology and stuff, and so. I thought it was a very close debate. I think that you need a better card on the not sustainable or the tipping points debate and explanation of the solvency mechanism for these things you identify as uniqueness or link triggers.
So it seems like both of you kind of thought that their REM stuff meant that like our renewable stuff couldn't solve warming. The way I understood that in the 2NR, and maybe I'm wrong, and like maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, was like it just like uses like their evidence is just like about like one resource that like one specific rare earth mineral that renewables use a lot of. I'm not sure what the impact of it is, and I'm not sure where they draw the connection to the warming.
So my understanding of that argument was that, and I actually concluded similarly, that I think this argument makes it difficult for you to access warming is that it displaces where the environmental destruction is. So it's like in the U.S. we no longer destroy the environment because we have these clean vehicles, but we've offshored that elsewhere. Which
and it's not just
the
environmental destruction; it's emissions that aren't accounted for in the like for me in the like production of solar and new technology and stuff. It's just like.
So you think they have a card that says that solar energy increases emissions?
Yeah.
Yeah, the card they have about offshoring.
Okay.
I think it was starts with a P, I think.
It's under the header A2 renewables. It's like green growth seems implausible for resources.
It says
wait.
metals such as geranium could double up around 2035, and it's about pollution. Why is that working?
Sorry. Extraction, damaging. I think that it is.
Exact minerals to industrialize technological products.
I understood it as environmental destruction. Whether it exactly is warming, I understood that those were connected. At least that was my understanding of it.
I think I can use this. Yeah, let me go ahead and do your decision. Yeah, we can.
Sorry,
You're fine. You're fine. Yeah, it's cool.
Just in my decision, I agreed a lot with Maggie. I started on the sustainability debate. I think that the argument that I found persuasive, or the most persuasive argument, was this: like, we don't know exactly what new economic shock is coming, but their card lists a ton of like potential things that could tank the economy. Like, we lose access to the grid, solar storms do stuff, just like all of those hosts of things. And I'm not sure why you create resiliency. If there's some solvency argument about why changing these regulations means that we build in resiliency. So it's not just the financialization argument. I think that's their second card, but the first argument about just like these like host of other environmental or these other economic things could come that crash the economy. I also thought the next argument is I thought they were ahead on the warming debate. I thought I was going to vote AF on degrowth doesn't solve warming, but the only card that I could find that's about this just says that cutting it by 40% is not good enough, or cutting GDP by 40% is not good enough. And maybe there was another argument about this, but it seems like the negative goes to like 0 GDP. At least that's what it seems like the scenario the status quo is. The other argument I was persuaded by was this: we would cooperate in a world of economic downturn. Like the U.S. wouldn't engage in conflict; we'd be more likely to cooperate. The other argument that I thought was pretty persuasive, but I wish had been developed a little bit more, either in the 1AR or a little more time in the 2AR, was this cognitive bias means no transition argument. It's just kind of a blip in the 2AR, but I think that if you spend more time there, that could be very persuasive, that we would just like rebound, because if it's true that that's the way we think, then...
So what more should the 2AR?
Well, so it's just like a one line, I think, in the 2AR. Like, I think some explanation of it, it answers all of their arguments. So the reason that I think that they're ahead on the transition debate is I think they've identified all these like pockets of movements that exist now. Some argue about why like those movements don't, like those don't translate to changing economic system, because when push comes to shove, those movements would shift back into the consumption mindset because of these biases.
So this wasn't connected to the like original cognitive biasing, but there definitely was an argument in the 1AR, 2AR, and the specific cards. Like there are cards about like P2P hacking and like Bitcoin and things, and that was our example given in the 2AR of why that consumption mindset's inevitable, because they're working through those market systems. Do you think like explicitly connecting those things more?
Yes.
Yeah, that wasn't very. I was kind of confused, or I wasn't sure how that fit into the rest of the debate when it was debated each time.
Oh, okay.
It was just like
yeah, it was just.
I get this counter example. I don't get how to. Yeah.
Card, but that makes sense. There was like a Christmas thing. My second question. Sorry, I didn't mean to. My second question is, for the REMs thing, this was flipping the 1AR. I don't think even in the 2AR, and I think we could have developed it more. We are regulation good AF, which means we regulate where we get those resources, how those technologies are developed, we make them more efficient, use less resources, which is in line with our PICA stuff. Do you think if that had been a bigger focus of the 1AR and 2AR, like our evidence doesn't support it 100%, but
I think you need I went and was looking at this card, and this callus card, and it's talking about green growth, and granted this part is not highlighted, but it's how I understand the card when it's talking about especially carbon emissions, and that's how I read the rest of the examples that it gives. And I think you need to like on point refute to this claim that the process of alternative energy does not produce.
Well, that was my point. Like regulation would help like reduce those emissions because it would be safer practices, because agencies are probably able to solve that. Like obviously that's spin of our stuff we don't really have.
Yes, I do. I think like if you're gonna like cut a card, I think it's worth just like refuting. This claim is worth taking the time to like cut a card that refutes this claim. That's like this is garbage. This is like not. I think that yes, that is a potential out, but I think you'll be more successful with the for me. I thought it was a good debate.